I love pneumatic tubes. If you ever read articles about old New York, there's a lot of stuff about how the tube system was. There was an inter-building tube system too.
Oh, really?
I don't know how that could possibly work. And the tubes were 16 inches in diameter,
Yeah.
and they would shoot pneumatic messages, like they'd push them between buildings. And none of those tubes are there, and they're thinking about like using them for fiber optics and stuff like that.
So this was actually the art test I took.
Oh.
I had to make this whole scene in a day.
Really?
No.
Did they pay you for that?
1 day?
Barely.
Wow.
I was so scared.
How much did you get done?
I think almost all the geometry.
Oh.
Wow.
In some cases, it used to be an overnight render.
So this was the first scene in the game that we ever actually did with some test assets. So I had, this is when I was proving out, okay, yes, we can do this. It was this hallway scene. We had manning up, running up and down. We had the security cam, kind of camera switching. We had text on the screen. We had animations. We had geolocation of the sound relative to the camera as the typing was down the hallway. And we had Manning running up and down. It was a really good test scene, and it kind of came to it at the very last second. Like, literally, I was compiling code as people ran in the room because I had a awful bug. But this was sort of like proof that, yes, we have all the elements to make this work. This was the first scene ever put together. And Manny, notice in the scene, Manny hardly ever clips behind anything, and that's partially because I didn't have the buffers working yet. But it was good enough that when people saw it, like, they were really impressed, and I was kind of surprised because I was like the new guy at LucasArts and was kind of half-assing my way through this and somehow made everybody really impressed. So I thought, at that point, I thought, okay, we can do this.
So, is there a reason that a lot of people who are in administrative positions of power have New York accents? Is that a
Everyone in the jazz era was from New York.
well, yeah, that's true.
A lot of people don't know that.
This deck of cards is a little frayed around the edges. Then again, so am I. And I've got fewer suits.
My writing has changed a lot since this. Like, I was really trying to write good dialogue here, which to me at the time meant a lot of like puns and like wordplay. Like, this suit is just this deck of cards is a lot like me. It's ragged around the edges, but I've got more suits. And I forget what it is, but it was like everything had to be this kind of like bon mot.
Well, that's kind of Chandler-esque too. I mean,
But I think I ease off on it in Act 2. I think I just start writing or in Year 2. There's a lot more just normal talking, which I think I kind of like a little bit more now. I mean, it's fun. It's fun to like have a crazy wordplay like that, but you can just kind of trip over yourself a lot too much if you focus on that, I think.
You hear reverb on the steps, and you hear the reverb on his voice, and that was real time. It's his real time reverb in a time when we never did that. We always pre-baked the files with reverb, and Jeff really had to fight for, I think it was like 5% of the CPU. But now anything that happens in this garage goes through that reverb. And like to modern game folks, audio people, it's just totally basic, no big deal. But back then it was such a big deal. And he really had to jump through hoops for it, and it's so great.
Mark Hamer, remember animating that Glottis coming out, and he had to put this thing called a lattice on his butt. And he was like, "What are you working on, Mark?" "Oh, I'm working on the Glottis butt lattice." And he was always like working on the Glottis butt lattice to like morph and squash and stretch his butt as it came out of the door. And so, 3 cheers to Mark Hamer and his Glottis butt lattice. Amazing work, still remembered to this day.
Elevator code.
Yeah.
Elevator code's the worst, man. Door code in general. There goes Don.
So there was a door box that you would draw on the ground that would have data attached to it that would trigger the art and the...
Well, it's like the old like when you walk into a supermarket in the old days, they didn't have like a IR thing that was pointing at you. They had like a pad on the ground.
Yeah.
You would roll your cart or step on the pad on the ground, and it would automatically open the grocery store for you. And it's just like that. Like there's a little invisible box that you cross that triggers all that stuff.
And then all the fiddly bits of people step on the box, step off the box, step back on it while the doors are opening and closing, and those doors are broken for a long time.
Savvy viewers will note that the lobby is based on a real building in San Francisco with Mexican architecture or Mayan Deco architecture. 450 Sutter, which is an actual building, which is the inspiration for the whole business Yeah, San Francisco's kind of there's a lot of deco-ish stuff around town, and that was a big part of making this world look the way it looked.
I love that mural because it's the 3 ways of traveling in the Land of the Dead, the car and the train and the boat. There's no air travel in the Land of the Dead. No Land of the Dead airlines.
I think the camera choices in this game were actually pretty fantastic as well. I don't know who's responsible for that. Was it storyboarded or was that you, Pete? Or?
Yeah, probably a little bit. There's a lot of stuff got worked out ahead of time, certainly, and I mean because we didn't necessarily build full 360 3D worlds. Except for like the offices and stuff.
Bet you can't do a cat.
Shows what you know, buddy. I can do anything. I can do birds, amphibians, famous poets. Go ahead. Name one.
Robert Frost.
Trying to stump me, eh?
I don't know why we chose Robert Frost for the balloon shape either.
Oh, that was genius because of the
it would be
of the
hard to make Robert Frost.
Yes, and also because I think the whole implication is that the clown is way, way beyond his pay grade, and he has disdain for all those around him, and so he makes shapes that his lowly
I never
audience
even thought
would...
about that being testimony to the skills of the clown. I thought of it as being Manny being a smartass. Because he asked for it. He's like, oh yeah? Can you do Robert Frost? And then, of course, the clown does it.
But see, that's a Chandler thing, too, because the detective is always smarter than sort of the world that he's in. So he's teasing the clown.
So to speak.
Yeah, so to speak. Because he knows the clown knows what Robert Frost looks like.
Can you imagine actually pulling yourself up a little chain of ties that are as long as the, like...
Well, that's what's great about... And then I like the view down.
He's so calm about it, too. He's like, chip, many stories. I mean, part of it is, I guess, he probably won't die.
He's already dead.
He's already dead.
He's already dead, so it's really just...
And I was thinking, does he have the muscles to do that? Or no, he doesn't have any muscles. He's just a living skeleton. How is he moving? He's magic. It's
spirit.
Soul.
It's animating, yes. I always liked the music up on the ledge.
Me too. It's very Bernard Herrmann.
And it always made me feel like a little. Maybe it's because I actually have
vertigo?
a little bit of vertigo or whatever you said. No, vertigo
isn't that that happens a lot in Vertigo, the movie Vertigo, like the
yes. Yeah, it probably comes from that.
Like that dreamy falling sensation.
Well, I'm a huge Bernard Herrmann fan. How can you not be? He's really he was the guy who really brought kind of a seriousness of classical music to scoring. I mean, the guys before me, there were great composers before him. They were a little more sort of kind of the entertaining aspect of orchestral music, and I think he was really very serious about it.
The computers in the game are, I think, where you can see Peter Chan's 12 Monkeys like influence, like Terry Gilliam mix of like, I don't know if you call it steampunk, but there's like a lot of analog big tube type things combined with Art Deco and old-fashioned typewriter keyboards.
Well, they had steam and punk in those days, right? But they didn't actually call it steampunk, right?
In the 90s? I think we might have had steampunk back then. Oh, yeah.
Jeez. See, I told you I was from the Mad Men era.
I'm so glad they made a show about you guys.
The living still give me the creeps.
What is this crazy music? How did you get it all warp sounding?
Well, that's a great... See, remember that I used to, when I did all the themes for Grimm, I carried around a little handheld cassette, right? So I'd go for my hike in the hills in the morning, and I'd carry my little cassette with me, and if something popped in my head, I'd hum into it.
And it drops into a puddle?
Well, those cassettes, I don't know if you remember much about cassette technology, because, you know...
I remember cassettes.
You do?
I made some mixtapes.
They didn't always last, especially the little tiny ones didn't last for a super long time. So, you know, if you used it all the time, which I did to compose, the machine would, the mechanism would start to wear out, especially if it ran out low on batteries. So yeah, that was me sitting at the piano working on that theme for the Land of the Living, which I recorded on the little handheld cassette and then played it back with batteries that were running out and recorded that into the digital system for the game.
That's awesome. Was that an accident at first? That's you just ran out of power at an earlier time writing something else?
You know, I can't remember. I think, it was an accident, but, I kind of meant to do it too,
In the Land of the Living, the people look horrifying because of that. Have you ever seen that optical illusion where you take a picture of someone from a magazine, you cut rectangles out of their eyes and their mouth, and then you turn them upside down, and they just look like demons?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's Land of the Living.
Yeah.
How is he sweating without skin? It's so inaccurate. Try to get it really accurate with the punching. Left, right, left, right. I think that's how you do it.
Oh, is it left?
Well, you don't just do 1-2, 1-2 with a speed bog.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it looks better.
In my boxing history.
My grandpa used to have a boxing bag in his basement. He showed me how it worked once.
So there's a scene here. So there's the wine bottle there on the side, or sorry, the bourbon bottle, and there's the taking a slug of his booze, and that was actually we had lots of math problems early in the game where we were lining up camera angles, like you mentioned, and these camera angles, if we had it off between the real time and the pre-render stuff, things got kind of messy. And so that was one of the first scenes we had where Manny as one character goes and interacts with another item in the scene, and it also has to be placed very precisely in the scene because it has to appear to be on the shelf. And it was really difficult to coordinate. He has to walk to exactly the right spot, line up to perform his animation. The cup has its own animation of flying through the air to his mouth. There's all these weird ways we handled it. I think we changed that later to handle it better so that the cup was actually attached to him. We'd swap it in, but, blank out the one that was on the shelf, put in the one that was in his hand, like a magic trick. But originally that was something we used to test it out and make it work. And I remember spending days on that and just being worried, like, oh man, we're never going to get this to align perfectly between 2D and 3D.
Yeah, I remember something about the mural. This would be the mural in, what's that guy's name? The Nemesis office.
Domino?
Domino. The mural on the ceiling of Domino's office is, there was something, I think maybe that angle wasn't planned or something in the game, and then whoever did the textures for that room put this crazy mural on there, and so it was like, oh, we have to show the mural. We have to get that up there. I remember there was some sort of fiasco around that mural.
Usually it's the other way around. Yeah. Usually artists put a bunch of beautiful work into something, and then someone turns the camera the other way and doesn't show it.
Right, exactly.
Down in QA, we got on the project way, way earlier than we ever had on any other project, and we would play the game with the concept art on the screen. But Manny was modeled and done and lit, or well, maybe he wasn't lit, I don't know, but he would zoom around the concept art, and it was all black and white, and that's why it was.
Oh, that would be neat.
Yeah, the games we make nowadays, we try to keep them real time, and the environments will come in the tens of thousands of polygons probably, but or at least under 100, I would say, at least at the Telltale studio, but here, I think we're almost unlimited unless it crashed the machines all the time.
Yes, it was unlimited, and it was like trying to render it on your iPhone.
Well, remember,
crazy.
He modeled like every single nut and bolt everywhere. In the
That's what it was.
That's what, and they were all high res.
Yeah, I was about to say, a certain amount of this was us not
It
really
might get a
knowing, and us
close-up.
not being efficient about where we, how we set everything.
As an animator, when you opened one of these environments to animate it, you had to basically throw everything away, except for the one thing that Manny touches or walks next to or something.
This line that he says a lot actually comes from the old IT guy at LucasArts, where we say, hey, the server's down. He goes, the server's not down. It's never down. You just can't get to it right now. Like or something.
This is one of the scenes where we had Tony and Maria Canals in working together, and they're both from Cuba, and they both had worked together before they were cast in Grimm. So it was kind of fun to get the two of them together again and play off of each other, which is, of course, the way you'd like to do any game.
Get in there and stay put until the boys downtown tell us what they want done with you. Someone's gonna take the fall for this, Calavera, and it ain't gonna be me!
I didn't realize how weird it was that he gets locked into a room by his boss, which I don't think is legal. But then again,
back in the 30s, you could do all kinds of stuff. Rubber hoses for cops and so on. I mean, it was just a 50 years after the Old West.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's weird to think about.
Yeah.
There's some concept art there in the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember, I just took Peter's stuff and like inverted it to make it look like a plan.
Really? You took someone else's textures and reused them?
Great artists borrow. No, wait. Good artists steal. Yeah.
Oh, the secretary has a dual identity. It's always lots of fun. Always lots of fun with dual identities.
Yeah.
I like that Eva gets to have a little, like, she's got more going on than you thought she did.
I love that too, and I like that there's something fishy in the Department of Death too. That's a good twist.
The ties, when Manny later uses the ties to cross over to the roof, he wanted to be more like a little bit more, less adventure game and more sort of skill game, where you had to kind of, line up the ties and throw the lasso and hook it on the thing. And I'll be honest with you, that was technically not something I was prepared to do in any way, shape, or form. It was kind of all I could do to make the rest of the stuff work. So the ties and the beavers were, and actually the shocks on the tree were all supposed to be a little bit more dynamic than a lot of the canned stuff you typically have in an adventure game. We just couldn't do it.
I used to work at a doctor's office, and one of the jobs that I was doing, just terrible jobs there, and one of them was the roof was covered in like 6 inches of pigeon guano up there. They had a flat roof, like the roof of this building, and they're like, look, we got to get that stuff off the roof. It's going to break the roof. There's so much pigeon crap on the roof. And I had to go up there with like this flat shovel and cut. It was kind of like cutting brownies out of a pan.
Yeah.
I was just chopping up the bird poop and just scooping it up and throwing it off the roof. And but in chopping it up, I occasionally find like in sedimentary rock, like an archaeologist or a paleontologist, I would find the bones of a dead pigeon just inside this weird brownie of guano on the roof.
Wow.
So I had my fair share of bad jobs.
So this was really a kind of therapy to get that.
Yeah, but really, there's not
experience.
enough poop on the roof to make this really.
Well, it's hard to indicate that with the technology of the time. Kind of just like if you did wind in a 8-bit game, it just sounded like and just sounded bad,
At least I got to clear the pigeons from the roof of my memories.
Manuel, are you in love with her? Love? Love is for the living, Sal. I'm only after her for one reason. She's my ticket out of here.
That line right there, love is for the living. I'm only after her for one reason. She's my ticket out of here. That was the key line that Tony and I would always go back to that kind of identified who that character was. The idea with Manny being a Hispanic Humphrey Bogart, that line evoked Casablanca in many ways, and that was kind of just we worked on that line more longer than we should have, but it was just one of those that we just felt was important to kind of nail and help define Manny.
And you could see Pete's musical treatment of it. He kind of suspended the music and had this little classical guitar melody that had a feeling of being like a pocket in time to further highlight that line.
Right.
Yeah.
I always like Glottis because he's just so pure in his. I mean, he's by definition pure in that he's just the spirit of driving, kind of like he was summoned from the land itself, and he has nothing but a desire to drive and go fast, and all his motivations are about like moving at high speed. He almost dies because he's going too slow at some point, and he has to go fast again to come back to life.
Right.
But he also obviously cares about friendship and Manny, and he's a very loyal character.
We coined a phrase called McConnellian ambience, and meaning Pete McConnell. His style of ambience, where you have a little idea and then a completely different idea, and then a completely different idea, just sort of sequenced, and the texture would get kind of big, and then it would get very small with a solo clarinet, and then something completely different would happen, and then you'd get a little bassoon, and so these ideas would waft in and out like clouds or just passing notions, and it's a great way to keep the listener entertained but not get in his way, and so we termed that a McConnellian approach to ambience.
Oh no. Ooh, ick. Shoot!
This is me playing with my own worst fears. I was realizing while we're making this game, I just randomly was thinking about how nice it is that spiders can't fly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, spiders are kind of icky, but they're on the wall. You can stay away from them. Don't go in the garage. Don't get firewood ever. You can stay away from spiders, but what if they could fly? What if you had to, instead of like a bee buzzing around you or something, you had to worry about like there's a black widow. Like, wouldn't that be creepy? So we made flying spiders in the game.
I remember in this room, as in several others, Julian, we used a sound ambience that we recorded using a contact microphone on various machines, like Coke machines, other vibrating devices or machine-like devices that produces a kind of interesting hum. And if you put your ear up against a Coke machine, or I was just on the Golden Gate Bridge last week and I stuck my ear up against one of those, 300, 200 foot pylons, and it's amazing the resonances that are going on in those type of resonant bodies. And we would record things like that and turn them into ambiences for some of the rooms.
Some of the things that we came up with for this game, like the Petrified Forest. Well, Petrified Forest is right out of a Bogart movie.
Right.
And that's coming from the name of a Bogart movie.
And he's actually a gangster.
He's a bad guy in it, yeah. But having these little things pumping it, I don't know where this came up with. Like, I feel like in games now we try to make things kind of make sense. Like, oh, you go to a gas station, something that exists. But here, it's a weird hydraulic pump factory with a counterweight on top of it for sucking something out of the marrow out of these trees.
Oh, right.
But it was all worth it because it was satisfying to see Glottis spin around on the top of it.
I like the environmental message myself.
Well, this is the area that Tim and I would make a lot of jokes about because, producer type person, I need to shorten the game, cut it somehow. So this area, I would, say, hey, we need to cut the beavers. Does that make sense?
He's like, no way, not cutting it.
Oh, well, the whole time we'd fight about it, and it was that one kind of thing where that was the story I told a little earlier about the ship, and he said, Leslie, a game is like a ship, and the ship is going, and it's going to keep going until it stops. And I was like, what kind of logic is that? It has to finish at some point. So I was like, look, the beavers got to go, and they'd always be on the list. And he actually drew me a little pictures on a napkin of like the armadillo, the beavers on fire. And he's like, why did you cut me, Leslie? Please don't cut me, Leslie. And he would just poke me.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
This is like a callback to those brave young men and their jaunty jalopies. You ever seen that movie? There's those outrageous young men, their flying machines.
No, that I remember.
There are these two crazy movies from the 60s, which were all about, it was kind of like the Wacky Races, but a real-life version. Magnificent.
Flying machines.
And it was like one of those movies, it was kind of like a Wild, Wild, Wild World or whatever. Like
a Mad
World, where all these people were chasing some crazy prize. But the cars in it always had things like that. I think that is a direct lift. Like one of the cars would have these hydraulic shocks that lifted up or just crazy extending things.
Right.
I still remember writing a big justification about tank controls when I was pitching this. People were like, let's make it so the controls are more like Mario, where you push it. No, point and click. I was thinking tank controls I thought were superior to point and click at the time because when you're pointing and clicking, you're distant from the screen, and the screen is this other thing that you're interacting with at your fingertips.
Right.
But when you're doing tank controls, you feel like you are in the center of the character.
Right.
And the world is rotating. The world's rotating around you, and so when you think, instead of going, I want to go on the left of the screen or I want to go to the right of the screen, you're saying, I want to look at the thing to the left of me and the thing to the right of me.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I don't know if that was necessarily the right decision, but it's a good piece of evidence that you can sometimes make a really good argument for the wrong decision. And that's something to watch out for in life. You know what I mean? Like you can make a really compelling and in fact win an argument.
Oh, yeah.
And be totally wrong.
Winning an argument has nothing to do with being right. That's for sure.
Exactly. It's just being able to make a good case.
This one was
how could you ever cut this?
I know, but programmatically it was buggy.
Oh, yeah.
And it was hard. No one understood like how to solve this puzzle for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, look, you got to pick something, and we hadn't started it yet. And so this is a classic Tim technique. When you want to cut something, he will start putting it in the game.
Yeah.
So that everything gets in. So, yeah, funny.
This scene, actually, this is the Beavers here, another good example of like, why you have to have coroutines in games, because you know, at least in adventure games, you have to have like a script that just says, how's this beaver going to behave? What's he going to do? And at the time that people were making games, the scripting languages weren't popular yet. You had a lot of games in C, and somebody would have been trying to write in their game engine, in their game loop, and go run the Beavers now. And in a scene like this, you had to be able to take that and say, this is how a beaver behaves. Right now, I'm thinking like a beaver. How would a beaver? He's going to crawl over here, and he's going to chew on these things, and then he'll get tired, and then he'll jump over here. The same thing with the pigeons and anything else. And that, again, it's like I didn't have to think about the fact that they were needed. They were obviously needed. I mean, that's one of the things that Scum had made very obvious. Like, you cannot make adventure games without coroutines. They didn't even call them coroutines, though. I mean, we didn't even know what to call them for a long time until,
Threads.
They were just threads, yeah. And actually, that was one of the early experiments. I actually tried to use actual Windows threads, because this is a Windows game. It wasn't a DOS game. This is a Windows game. We can use actual threads. And I initially did try and actually have different Lua threads, and it was just so heavyweight. The machines are so tight, and it was so much overhead, and it was so complex. And it was like, no, we need something lightweight. It needs to be really focused on what the game does.
We were like, what is the flame source for the Beavers? And they're like, well, they have a nuclear, they have a core. They have a nuclear core, so they're thermonuclear flaming bone beavers.
Yeah, I have to say, flaming bone beavers. I mean,
you would think that
what
would be
does that remind you
controversial.
of? Yeah.
A band name?
Maybe, yeah.
I really wanted to have this moment of Lasco bonding with Glottis, and that through the magic of cars, and talking about engines and stuff, and cars bring people together, talking about engines.
Well,
because I never had sports.
Internal combustion.
I never liked sports. I was not into the manly unifier of sports, but
me neither.
But cars you can talk about with the toughest of dudes.
That's true. That's true.
I love the tiling floor. It's my favorite part in the film. And the fact that it's a automat, which was part of a period reference too. Like those ways that there used to be these restaurants in New York where you'd go, or big cities where you'd go in and the food was ready for you behind these little panels, and you would just open the door and take it, which is just an interesting way of serving stuff. Like just separate the server from the eater, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, that is, I never...
Like you don't want to see the wait staff, so they're behind this wall because of some weird social reason.
That is
know.
Weird.
And they don't really have automats anymore, but I always thought that's what was behind that.
It does seem a little impersonal, doesn't it?
The character Celso is played by a really funny actor called Peter Lorre, and when he came into the studio the first day, he had this real look of apprehension about him, and it turned out the word in Hollywood was that Grim Fandango was code name for Star Wars Episode 1 casting. So when he was coming in for the project, people were telling him, you're going to be going in and George Lucas is going to be there and they're going to be flying you up to the ranch. And he was terribly disappointed when he walked in, and the only person in the studio was me.
When you run into Celso Flores again, and there's that, he's always down and out, and he's listening to this music on the radio while he's working, which is actually Hector's music. Most of the jazz pieces are some variation on Hector's theme, and they're being piped in everywhere. Like every time you listen to something on the radio, it's actually Hector's music, and it's sort of this idea that Hector is behind everything and in control of pulling all the strings of commerce and then here's this little guy, Celso's mopping the floor, and with this reminder that he's just a little guy in a big world with these big forces.
That's awesome.
Does that sound too
No,
philosophical?
I think that works on a primal level. I don't think I was conscious of that, but I think it was working.
And just the amount of research that went into all of this, because I just remember Tim going to every film noir movie ever, and we would just... All the time there would be something to do, and he's like, want to go to the movies? And it was just, I mean, you can see it, the dark shadows, and then the music. I mean, everything is just so film noir and really pulls you in.
Yeah, I remember us all going to see Casablanca I think it was in the Castro Theater or something. It was one of those old San Francisco theaters. I forget which one it was, but it was the whole gang of us went and.
Yeah, remember? Did you guys go to the Golden Gate Fields for the horse races? I know they weren't.
I wish.
That was part of it because I think there were some scenes around that, and that was just fun. I mean, just the research trips.
Yeah,
those were fun.
When we leave the diner for the last time, there's a sort of a moment with just kind of a technical and sort of dramatic moment with the music where the music on the radio is playing, and there's going to be a little bit of a cut, and then you go to this cutscene music, which takes it's supposed to be sort of a seamless break from the game music to the cutscene music, and then the music kind of comes out of the radio, and doesn't sound like it's on a radio anymore. It's the music of people's dreams and wishes.
So Tim created a character, which I very much appreciate. I love her. Her name is Lupe, and she happens to be a little bit based on me and my idiosyncrasies. And so I remember one time we were hanging out, and he told me, he's like, see, how can you tell me that I don't understand our relationship? Like, I can write about it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, see, she's super organized. Nobody listens to her, but she has a lot of really important things to say. And see, we need her, and that's what you realize.
That's awesome.
So I was like, oh, I love you. And she does karate kicks. That was the best, because I like to punch people. And so if you notice, sometimes I don't know if they have it in here, but she punches in the air. She does air punches.
That's awesome.
She was really easy to cast because I had such a great frame of reference for her.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
So these is like scenes are from the production of the game in a way where Leslie would come to me like, look what I made. I made a chart of every single scene in the game plus every single actor, and I coded it. Yellow means Manny's in it, and blue means this prop is in it. And she's so excited about these things that she did, and this character is doing the exact thing.
Yep.
You have to take things from your life and put them in your work, even though they don't read anything to anybody else.
Well, that just means work will be about life rather than life being about work, right?
Exactly. I wish you would slide down the banister because we put a lot of effort into sliding down that banister. Come on, slide down the banister. I recommend any player who's in this room slide down the banister. It's much faster than walking.
Especially if you're 6 and you don't have terrible consequences when you hit the bottom.
You should not try that at home. Actually, kids, you should. You should go slide down the banister of your house right now.
Everybody's got to do it once.
I remember animating Manny sliding down the banister. And I remember Tim kept calling for something. He's got to look cool. And so I did that, and I don't think he was ever really happy with it. So I don't know. Apparently don't know what cool means.
You got to put some Ray-Bans on him.
Yeah. I mean, Manny's a suave guy, but I don't know if suave guys slide down banisters. Maybe I should have done it slower.
Manny's music, the Casino Calavera music, that was a big moment for me doing the score because it was done fairly early on, and it kind of it determined a lot of other stuff, just sort of stylistically.
Mm-hmm.
Get that sort of Gene Krupa thing going on in the beginning. And
Gene Krupa.
Yeah, one of the great drummers of all time.
I just want to have a really international flair. I guess because Casablanca was very international. But also I love the game Last Express, the Jordan Mechner game. Last Express, you're on a train, and there's a lot of listening to conversations that are not presented at full volume because you're eavesdropping. You're walking down the hallway and you hear someone talking in a room, but they'll often be very quiet, but often sometimes in another language like French or German or something.
Mm-hmm.
And just the idea of like overhearing a quietly spoken French conversation was so neat in that game that we tried to have people talking in other languages in here like that.
Mm-hmm.
The croupier in the gambling room was speaking French, I believe.
Oh wow, I forgot about that mural. That was supposed to be sort
really
of
good.
Oh well, thank you. I did that.
Did you?
No, I did, but it was based on like a Gustav Klimt.
Gustav Klimt, yeah.
But then I also did those really bad textures on the roulette wheels, and
Oh, they're fine.
oh. No, but I remember Adam Schnitzer actually getting angry at me. He was like, don't paint light in the paintings.
Who got angry with you?
Oh, not really angry. I mean, he only hit
You probably
me.
felt the same way as when Tim said,
Mandy's not cool enough sliding down that banister.
Yes.
Just make it cool. Canadian animator.
What's that about?
That's now so not cool.
Chowchilla Charlie.
Oh, yes.
That name comes from an actual person I know who was from Chowchilla, which no one remembers anymore. But when I was a kid, an entire school bus full of children was kidnapped in the town Chowchilla. Do you remember that?
No.
California.
Wow.
A school bus full of kids was kidnapped, and the people demanded ransom. And it was crazy to think about. It was on the news. It was
Jeez.
Chowchilla. Everyone was talking about this kids, and eventually they were found and rescued, and I don't believe they were hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So I can talk about that story now.
Yeah.
And all the kids went home. But and then years later, I just a friend of ours was dating this guy named Charlie, and he was from Chowchilla, and I was like, oh wow, were you on the bus? He was like, no, I was sick that day. I was sick. I didn't go to school that day, and so I didn't get kidnapped.
Wow.
And we always referred to him as Chowchilla Charlie.
Wow.
And he's now in the game as Chowchilla Charlie, even though his personality is not as sleazy as this character. He was a fine, outstanding, although very lucky guy.
Yeah.
But this is our Peter Lorre character.
That's Kay Cuter, and Kay was, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, and he had a big, long, gray beard.
Yeah.
And he was a raging smoker.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
you'd have to break him every 45 minutes,
Oh,
otherwise he'd start getting into a really bad mood. And on one of those sessions, he plays the croupier later on, where he speaks French and English, and it's just, he delivers the numbers. We were behind on time, and so I sort of pushed him to an hour, and all of a sudden I found myself in an argument with Kay over how to pronounce 20 in French.
Oh.
And so I was like, it's definitely time for a smoke break on you. Get out of here.
I think we're going to come up to Garv's set that I destroyed. That I destroyed 2 weeks of Garov's work by trying to learn how to 3D model, and somehow I ended up erasing 2 weeks of his work. Because it was the fish place that you had to redo.
Oh yeah, the elevator.
Yeah, the elevator and that place with the fish. We definitely should give a huge shout out to Peter Chan, and yeah, I'm still jealous of that guy.
Chan the man.
I know. Just when those packages would come, it would just be like Christmas, and you'd open, you'd see those, and you just think, oh man, and he's a nice guy too. You know,
the weird thing about
family.
that was I never experienced like the delivery of the package
Oh.
firsthand, but I still got excited about it.
No, they're beautiful, and he's such a sweetheart. And I'm sorry, Garv. This is the set that you had to build
This
twice.
is Garov's, right?
Yeah, this is the one.
This was the gift that kept
And it's
on
actually
giving.
very beautiful, I might add.
Yes. Well, a second time is
The second time I
But I'm sorry. You were saying that was a real building.
Yeah, yeah.
Where was that, in Spain?
I think it's in Paris, I think.
Oh.
And I remember seeing a photo of it and being like,
Oh.
wait, Peter.
Good artist borrow, great artist steal.
There's that spotlight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this was another, we lifted up took the technology from RenderDroid, which was in Jedi Knight, but it didn't have spotlights at the time. It just had directional lights and point lights. So that was actually one of the very first things when
it's the first thing you did.
Yeah, when I got hired onto the team, which I was brand new to LucasArts, and Tim and Brett brought me in, and my first thing, I was like, I'm gonna put in spotlights because I know how to do that, and it's gonna matter, and that'll be my stake in the ground. And this was one of the first scenes I worked on that had spotlights. So when Manny walks off stage and you see the light, when he walks out of the light, it was a pretty important moment. Everybody thought that was pretty cool. I was like, all right, I did something. I'm in this amazing project with this amazing team, and I did something.
And then for some reason, I was always really interested in beatniks and reds. I think it was so foreign to me, like the Red Scare was not part of my actual life, but it always seemed like this thing it's hard, it's funny. It was always funny to me to imagine how passionate people were about that, how big of a deal it was for them. And it was always so, but if from a safe distance, it was just kind of entertaining. Like, oh wow, people are we're really concerned about communists everywhere and unions and
No, I remember when I was a little kid, there were people would still talk about communist plots in all seriousness. Yeah.
In the final version of the game, are the backgrounds actually just pre-rendered flats?
Yes, they are.
See, that's amazing to me because we live in the world of 3D now. And we're used to floating the camera around inside of these things. But once you chose your camera angle to pre-render something, that was it. There you go.
No, it's Manny walking around in a blank 3D room with Z-depth data to clip him in front of the stuff that he needs to clip in front of.
This is where I had never heard of actual sea bees before, and someone made that. I talked about how they could be these bees down there, and they're like, oh, like sea bees, and I was like, what are sea bees?
Yeah, they were a Navy thing. Yeah.
And wait, does that come from the letter CB, like?
I don't know.
Or construction brigade or something.
Yeah, good. Like Jeep comes from general personnel vehicle. Yeah.
So and this bee is called Terry because of the character from On the Waterfront, Marlon Brando's character named Terry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we got all that stuff.
That's Raphael Sparge, who he was actually the main character in Knights of the Old Republic, in the original game. But Raphael was a big on-camera guy, and hadn't really done a lot of voiceover. And there's a scene later on where he's addressing all of the workers. And the thing about Raphael was that he physically performs when he's in the studio.
Oh, right.
And so as he was addressing the field, he kept on going off mic, and so the engineer's like, oh, we got to keep him on mic. And so I said, hey, Raphael, can you stay on mic? He's like, oh, really sorry. We re-rolled, and all of a sudden his energy just went
oh, interesting,
down, and so it just wasn't working the same way. So we
Yeah.
pulled out another 2 mics and put him out.
Oh,
so
that's
that,
great.
So that he could then go, you are the fat cats of industry, and he could kind of move his head, and we still caught it. And so then we just cut around the 3 tracks to get the final
that's
take.
so crazy.
Yeah. But he's a great actor.
To some extent, Grim Fandango is a bit of a mutt. It's got pieces of Jedi Knight, it's got pieces of Scum, it's got pieces of Outlaws, it's got pieces of, it's got IMUS coming in, and it's got the Lua language. So it was a game kind of made on a shoot, for all the technical challenges in it. A lot of pieces were sort of pre-existing, and kind of it was a matter of maybe a new era of game development where you don't write everything from scratch, but you kind of put it together in the best possible way.
Well, and one of the kind of the side effects of that was, since we had pretty robust solutions to video playback and rendering and art pipes in front of us, it really, a lot of the effort, aside from just making everything, all the blocking and tackling working, was spent on how to making games like this convenient and producible and artist friendly. And you had built some tools that were really unlike the things that appeared in RenderDroid or Smush or some of the technologies it was built on. So it's a bit of a mutt in that we borrowed a bunch of really great technology, but there's also a lot of really innovative stuff.
The one thing for a sound designer or for a composer, when the story is great and the writing is great and the pacing is great, whether it's a film or a game, you can't help but weigh in a successful way yourself, because there's this flow already and you're just participating with it and enhancing it. One of the jobs of a composer, especially in a game like this, a lot of time passes and you need to both entertain the listener and provide musical interest, but it has to also last for a very long time without being tiresome. And I think Pete did a great job at striking a balance between a great deal of musical interest, but also kind of hanging back and taking its time and letting the story unfold, letting the player concentrate on the game.
I love how all the characters have very distinct voices that match their personality and their look. Like, how much would Tim give you direction, and how much was your direction influencing?
Well, like, ideally, when you go through the process, you have character pictures along with the audition copy, and we would send that out to the various agencies, and the auditions would come back, and the process kind of does that for you, because you're listening to the auditions and you're looking at the picture, and you narrow it down to like, you know, a handful of candidates, and then you sort of we'd sit down with Tim and you know, just go through them and go, that's, you know, sometimes there's only one choice, you just know it.
Right. It's just so great.
Yeah.
All of them.
What you do is you cast for like the major characters, and then you use that same talent pool with a lot of the smaller characters. Right. And so that's why Kay is, you know, he was cast for Velasco, but then the croupier just was one of those that's like, okay, well, that fits, he works.
So you let the actors pretty much kind of come up with their character as well when they look at the picture?
Yeah. Well, definitely. Like for this secondary characters, they're totally undefined when you're in the studio, and so you just kind of sit there, look at the picture, look at the lines, talk about it, just set a dialogue voice in, and then go.
Yeah, just create. I love it. It's just creative everywhere, you know, like through the whole thing. Like not just with us, but even with the actors and stuff like that. And you really are like watching a movie. Yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely.
And you really want that relationship between sort of the voiceover director and the actor to be collaborative and allow them the freedom to bring stuff to the table and try things. And, you know, it just adds a lot.
And so that guy, Toto Santos, which is the name of All Souls Day, that was one important casting thing that meant so much at the time. And I love The Usual Suspects.
Yes.
And there's a burn victim in the very beginning of the game, a guy who was burned on the ship.
Right.
And he's in the bed, and he's the first guy who says, "Guys are Sose."
Okay, right.
Is this Hungarian or Polish?
Yeah, yeah.
And we got that actor to do Toto Santos's voice, because I was like, I want him to sound like that guy from Usual Suspects. And so if you listen to him, he's just awesome. Like, I wanted to have him say "Kaiser Soze" in the game, but he doesn't.
I'm not sure what I hate more, crowds or cats, but I'm definitely not going near either one today.
It's strange, the characters in this game don't like to go into crowded areas, almost as if it's too hard to render them.
You know, there's all these background scripts that do things as you enter a room. It's like, you know, start all these scripts when you enter the room, like they do all these background actions. Then when you leave the room, it's just to stop all those scripts. And it was all, you know, left to chance because it, you know, left to programmer error. And there was one. So we were talking about this earlier. There's a script that runs the cat races, and it runs the announcer for the cat races, and it actually, true to Tim's attention to detail, he wanted to actually simulate cat races, and
there
actually
are actual cat races going on.
There are cats that are being raced, and the same name will show up, and you'll hear this cat getting ahead of the other one. I think Chris Purvis did that.
Yeah, and the odds are real. The winnings are real. It is.
Yeah, Manny's wallet fills up very important. So, the cat races are running, and so it's in the background. The announcer's running, and it's the simulation of, you know, these cat races being run. And yeah, they never killed that script. So you play the rest of the game from the cat scene, and the cat race simulator script is always running.
Yes, from the moment the cat races start to the end credits of the game, the cat race simulation is going on in the background.
There are still kitties racing today.
Yes.
You hear the cats racing? We were always so sad that we never showed the cat races. But
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
for budget reasons, obviously. We didn't want to cut the actual cats, but I wanted to have giant cats running on a track like that.
And the idea of a cat's racing being herdable enough to race is pretty... Why cats?
Why cats? There was a... God, I don't remember. Why cats? That's a good idea.
I mean, I just remember making the music going, wow, wow, at some point, because you're near the kitty litter.
How big were those when you drew them? Like the posters and the murals and stuff.
We could actually work rather big.
Did you have Photoshop back then?
We had Photoshop, but I don't know if we had layers back then. Or
we had layers.
I think we did. Oh yeah, we had layers, but maybe
Paul
only
just didn't know what they were.
No, but I think too, you only had a one undo or maybe two undos.
Oh wow. Is that cat actually modeled, or is that a painting?
No, that's a modeled cat.
The lighting is so soft. It's.
Mm-hmm. I think I might have even. Oh, please, did I do that? Did I model that cat? I might have modeled that cat.
It's a cool looking cat. Just the lighting.
Thank you.
He's
one sexy cat.
Well, I remember, speaking of VO, I remember you casting this, and then I remember you vanishing.
Yeah.
And you were gone for so long recording this.
Yeah, I was down in... Actually, it was the only one time we rented an apartment rather than staying at a hotel, because I was down in LA recording this for 6 weeks, and then I was bookended on either side with 2 weeks for 2 Lucas Learning projects.
Yeah.
And so it was.
Yeah, you just moved away.
Yeah. It's a long time.
Rubicava is named after a girl I knew in the 4th grade. Her last name was Rubicava. That's a fun fact for you.
Wow.
She's married now. Doesn't use it anymore, so I get to use it.
You're keeping it alive.
Her character's a little bit inspired by, I think it's Big Sleep too, where Bogart, he's hiding from someone. He needs to hide in a bookstore.
Right.
And he goes in there, and there's a woman in there, and she's really into him.
Do you have the Ben-Hur 1863 edition, the one with the errata on page 47 or something?
Wow, that is a memory. Yeah.
Well.
And it's just really, he looks at her, and he's like, she seems like she's really attracted to him, if I remember correctly. And he like takes off her glasses and is like, yeah, okay. Like it was really kind of messed up scene. But
well, it's that that was the subtext of the noir film.
And then he pulls the shades.
Hanky panky.
Yeah, the hanky panky. Yeah, they lock the door and pull down the shades. And that's a little bit what this scene is all a reference to or inspired by.
Because she's telling him her story.
Mm-hmm.
This is Pamela Siegel, who plays Bobby on King of the Hill. She's quite a character. She's a minivan with flames on the side and a skull on the front where it replaces, I don't know what brand it is, but let's say it's Chrysler or somebody, and so instead of the Chrysler logo, there's a skull and crossbones. She's pretty funny.
Did she just do this as one big long...
Yeah, all one take, so she could build and build.
Yeah.
And, let it sort of ebb and flow.
And obviously Pete's quotation of home, there's no place like home, is something we all admired in Carl Stalling, who did a lot of the composition for the Merry Melodies, Looney Tunes cartoons. And anytime, as you may know, that a chicken comes on screen or something, it'll play Turkey in the Straw or various public domain songs that were relevant to the subject of the moment. So she was reminiscing about home, and Pete strikes up.
That's really cool.
There's no place like home. Speaking of database, I mean, that was really how we accomplished so much, right? Is from an organizational standpoint of the music, of the sound effects, and of the voice. And I remember, especially for voice, how critical it was. And what we in the sound department would do is inherit and share the use of the database with the voice department. And you could do a search and isolate all the lines for, say, Manny, or isolate all the lines that needed to have reverb baked into them, or another type of processing. And then you would just divide and conquer and just master everything in groups and bring it all together, have a single reference for volume, and use the database to keep organized and isolate different found sets of different criteria.
I'm a strong believer in things that should be, when you're making stuff, it should be something that could only been made by you or in that group of people, and at the time you made it in the place you made it.
Yes.
I think Grimm is definitely that case. That's one of the great things about Grimm. I think it's a collection of amazing artists like you and the visual artists and the programmers and the actors, and everything that came together for that game was just such a was almost an overwhelming distraction of amazing artists coming together. Like oh my God, look at that background. Oh my God, listen to this music. Oh my God, listen to that voice. So I think it makes that game really special. But it also has a lot of personal details that are just kind of woven into it that makes it so, like, even if we were making this game from scratch with the same intentions today, it would just be completely different. I don't know why there's so much union jokery in games that I've worked on, but I've always found it maybe because it was a big part of movies that air like On the Waterfront, and not so much unions, but mobster corrupt unions.
Right.
There's always a big part of that, going on, and then also like worker, anti-worker, communist themes going on. Like it was all tied together. And I don't know if that all sprung out of On the Waterfront or other movies.
On the Waterfront, though, was kind of, it was sort of championing the plight of the working man, but it also was talking about the dark side of the union thing for sure.
But it was a corrupt union. It was a mob-run deal.
That's true.
I remember at the time it was a big debate. Like, should we require P100 or P133? Like penny 100, penny 133. It's like, Nope. Your target platform is whatever was on sale at CompUSA for $500 last year.
It's like a P70.
Yeah, it's like P60 I think is what we ended up with as the minimum spec. We ended up going for P90 at the end, but it was one of the things where it's like those kind of constraints where it's like you really could pull it off with all the kinds of machines we had in the company, but the average consumer who we wanted to sell the game to did not have a machine like that. So that's one of the vagaries of the PC market that still persists,
Yeah, and you wouldn't, when you think about Grimm, you wouldn't necessarily think, but there's like all hand-coded assembly rasterizers in here. There's hand-coded assembly blitters in here. Lots of like layout asset management. This was a tricky game to optimize and to get running acceptably on the kind of machines that people were going to be running it on. But it doesn't come off like the same technical challenge as a Jedi Knight or something like that. And it wasn't.
It's different kind of technical challenge. Much more kind of interdisciplinary.
It was really getting all this weird stuff happening at the same time.
We wanted them to show. Eventually, you're going to see him do a bee dance, which we were really proud to get. I had to actually do some dancing for the animators to get that to be accurate as possible. Because when bees find pollen or a bunch of flowers, they fly back to the hive and then they shake their abdomens in a certain way, which tells people what it helps lead the other bees.
That's right.
So when Terry's trying to lead the this right here, he's like trying to lead the other bees, and so he gives them a speech, and then he shakes his abdomen a little bit to tell everybody where to go. Shake, 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 shake. I can do that dance really well.
Remember one time showing Pete something, he said, well, I don't like it, but I don't know why. And which is the most helpful criticism that you can ever get, because you don't know how to fix the thing. But I'm being facetious.
Oh, membrillo, my brother actually makes membrillo, which is a quince jelly that you eat with cheese. Membrillo means quince.
It sure doesn't sound like it.
Membrillo.
Oh, membrillo, that's different.
Yeah. What do you think I said?
How was the lighting handled on the characters in each environment? Does anybody remember that?
I think, however, we were able to set up a couple of lights. I think that was it. I mean,
wasn't there some information that you guys would take the set? Because didn't we have to save a copy of our sets with like, the key light and the fill, or just I thought we would save a version of the very simple.
That's possible, yeah, as a starting place. But I mean, it was all very kind of rudimentary.
And you had to be really strategic with, what is the best use of a minimal amount of lights to accommodate the character in the entire scene that he's got to be in.
Yeah, there was no, for all this stuff, there was no roadmap or procedure for like, oh, this is how you do 3D forests or light character. I mean, we had to make everything up and solve every problem to get everything to happen pretty much in this. So there's a lot of just on the fly, different people figuring stuff out per scene, how to make something work. And as a result, some things work better than others.
So all the water in year 2 is a mess, and I was actually very unhappy about the water because they loved making realistic looking water, and they wanted to use all these shaders and softimage to make the water look awesome and have waves and everything. And so there's all these scenes like this lighthouse scene where there's like just a huge amount of the screen are just undulating water, which compresses terribly for smush and video. It was just awful. And that's all through this part of year 2, and I got so freaked out because I thought that we'd never be able to do anything if we're just having every background. We might as well make every background be a full running movie if at this rate.
Yeah, it was like for the film industry where softimage was mostly being used. Water was kind of the soup du jour. It was everybody was doing water.
How good is your water?
Yeah, and so you would fire up softimage, and it could do all this amazing water simulation.
I remember arguing with Peter about it because Pete wanted to have these angles where you would see a bunch of the water, and I'd be like, you can't do it, don't do it. He's like, no, you got to be able to see the water, and then we'd have like this 3/4 of the screen was just this undulating water. They're big, I mean they're movies and they're big and awesome.
So there you can see some of the artifacts in the spotlight.
Yep.
Where it gets all bandy.
Yeah.
That's just a result
16-bit, baby.
Result of the video compression, and the water would do that.
Yeah, you can see even the frame rate on the background doesn't match. I think because we tried to make that one smaller. That lighthouse is just such a mess. We actually made it smaller. I think we ran a lower frame rate just so we could actually fit it in memory.
I mean, that was always my favorite piece of concept art, was the flowers flying off the lighthouse.
Yes.
And this lighthouse is always so beautiful.
Yeah.
And a lot of those noir stories just have these really hard luck characters who don't get a break. And, there's the private eye is trying to solve a story, but they'll meet someone along the way who just gets bumped off, and it's not their fault, and they just get wrapped up in things. And
yeah, like the little 2-time crook in or 2-bit crook in The Big Sleep, who drinks the poison, but doesn't spill the beans, as it were. Yeah.
And Lolo's one of those.
Lola's one of those
victims.
characters who's
You get to learn a lot.
faithful but down and out.
It goes from the super traumatic moment of the flowers and her death, and then all of a sudden there's his tongue on a card. The numbers are important. That's all I'm going to say. But Lengua, around this time, I went to I remember going to a festival, street festival, carnival festival in the Mission, and drinking a lot of beer. And then I think the more drunk you are in the sunshine at a festival, the more like you are to eat tongue tacos. That's my personal theory. So I ordered, I was like, what's a lengua? And they're like, it's a tongue. I was like, give it to me. And it was delicious.
Of course it is. Yes, I was going to say, see, you're talking the wrong guy there.
And I liked it so much that we put the lengua in here. So good. I recommend everyone.
Yeah, I mean,
eat some
come
tongue.
on, be consistent. If
It
you're gonna
doesn't
eat the
lick you
cow,
back if that's what you're worried about.
Exactly. And it's.
You think it's going to be all tough like your own tongue.
No.
And you hate biting your own tongue, but.
No. There is a little bit of worry about biting someone else's tongue. That's true. There's something, yeah. Something a little.
Or that it's tasting you.
Yeah.
You get a special award for playing the Rusty Anchor song.
I secretly wanted to sing this one. I did a demo for you. Remember?
Yeah, this is one of the things, much like Cabbage Boy, that we wrote together.
Yep.
I wrote the lyrics, and then you came up with the tune, and then changed the lyrics a little bit to actually make them more musical. My boat's got a rusty anchor.
Yeah. Oh, rusty anchor, going down. See?
Do it. Oh, rusty anchor's got to stink around. I said stink around. It's stick around. Wait, why did Cataglotis leave the piano playing thing and come down here? Oh, you got him the pass. You gave him a pass.
Right.
So
now he's a high roller.
And he's an alcoholic and a gambler because of you.
Right.
But it's all for a good cause, adventure game playing.
Hello? Hello out there? Could somebody please open the door? I seem to have locked myself in this teeny tiny room. I am actually very claustrophobic, so if somebody, s'il vous plaît, oh, let me out of here, immediately. Oh, wow.
Here we're being very insensitive to claustrophobics. And French people. Probably would never do it today. But
just think of the Twitter response from the claustrophobic French people, right?
So this is one of the parts of the game where a huge amount was cut out. There was supposed to be a gigantic action sequence like there was in all of, I think we cut a giant action sequence out of every year, but there's a gigantic action sequence where there's an animal called the Dillopede that guarded the bottom of the elevator. It was a giant armadillo, and the Dillopede was there to kind of snap at Manny as he came down. And there's this whole sequence where you had to kind of, you had the Dillopede hanging by some elevator cable, and he was snapping at you, and you had to swing on him or something like that. And it's just the idea of a giant vicious armadillo still sticks with me. But it was one of those things where it's like, you look at the context of the game, and it's an adventure game, and the budget's short, and we're already going to be a huge game. What purpose is it serving the game? So we had to cut a lot of stuff out like that just was really cool and fun to design, but ultimately not critical of the game and was going to be really expensive.
But I do remember, did you guys notice this, or do you remember this, that you couldn't solve this puzzle if you had a fast computer?
What? Really?
Yeah, so right after the game shipped, computers, got better, right? And so the processors were much, much faster, and there's a timing element to this puzzle. And if your computer was too fast, there was not enough time to actually execute and do the puzzle.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So that was a bummer.
And not awesome.
This is our first 3D game, and it's funny to see how many puzzles are about the physical properties of things, as opposed to in a 2D adventure game, you would never make something based on the shape of something or leverage. Like that whole puzzle was very physical. Like you had to move these two objects and stop them from sliding past each other, and the forklift jacked up on its back wheels. And I think we were just so excited to be in a world of physical stuff, or maybe because we were in a world of physical stuff, we had to actually make it physically realistic.
No, and I think this is one of my first sets. Yeah, I remember this is, both of those were, well, it was one of the first ones that I'd ever modeled. And again, it was very simple geometry.
So this is one of the parts in the game that was very inspired by Gilda. You ever seen Gilda? I think Rita Hayworth.
No.
It's a great
Sounds like I'm gonna
noir
go home and
movie.
see it now.
It's amazing, and it's the scene that you always see when they show Rita Hayworth, where she just flips her hair up and says, "Who, me?"
No.
So anyway, it's about it's set in a resort town where there's a casino, and the main character, there is the main character is working at a casino, and there is this kind of corrupt local law enforcement officer who shows up every night. And the way he gets paid off by the casino to not bust it is that he always comes and bets on number 2 at a certain table, and then they always give him his money, and number 2 always wins and stuff. And so that, I think it's the same number in this game. We always use number 2.
We stole a lot of the really good things out of Scum and kept them. We kept the idea of the chore tool, which I just called chortle, but they had cyst and bile and all these bodily humor flavored tools from Scum. Cyst, bile, phlegm, mucus, and we kept, but there are analogs, like the chore tool is the really big one, but it's the analog to what they did in Cyst, which is the costume editor for all the other adventure games. And we kept those paradigms. You know, they manipulate 3D elements and 2D elements and movies and things together on one timeline, but that really is harkening back to exactly what they were doing in the 2D game. So
Lucas is remembered for the great art and the funny writing and all of that, but it's all built on just
tech.
Amazing tech.
Oh no, all the sprouted sailors. But what happens to their souls when they're sprouted?
I was wondering that myself.
I think the idea was they take the flowers and bring them back to the land of the living. They like it's recycled.
They get
never really thought
they
through.
get reincarnated, which is sort of what you don't want to do.
Just thinking back to the way that we all worked together at LucasArts, you know, the way the different departments collaborated. You know, it was everybody just assumed that we were all rooting for each other and on the same team, and there was almost no sense of kind of trial period or nowadays and for a long time now in the video game industry, a lot of times when you are in a service capacity such as sound or audio, music, there's really a vetting period where what you're presenting is being vetted by the directors and the producers, and you need to hear back, you know, what did they think? Are they want to continue to work with us and that kind of thing? And that's fine. That's the way the film industry is, and that's the way things are. But back then, especially at LucasArts, it was not at all like that. Everyone just wanted to be working together. It was all one team. Everyone was facing in the same collaborative direction, and achieving fun results. And I think that creates an atmosphere in which people feel comfortable creating and taking risks. So it paid off, I think.
Oh, I wanted to also talk about, I think this was this may have been the first game, it may not have, but at LucasArts that I can remember, where you walk the character around and procedurally Manny's head is turning towards points of interest.
Yeah.
Procedurally.
It was the first head tracking, right?
With a computer.
LucasArts? Oh, definitely at LucasArts it was, for sure.
I think that was because Tim didn't want to have like the UI highlighting stuff, right? Or he wanted to try something new?
Yeah, it was partial hint and partial probably red herring, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like show the player that they're point them in the direction of interesting subjects in the environment.
And I mean, it shows you everything you can interact with, and not everything you can interact with is a solution either, you know, so.
There's no UI in this game, if anyone didn't notice, and that was by design.
One weird trivia fact about the world that I learned, I saw a couple of Manny Calavera tattoos when I was at PAX, and someone asked me, why are there no Glottis tattoos? And I started Googling, and I couldn't find a single Glottis tattoo on the internet. I found many Manny tattoos. And so I don't know why Glottis. I'll just say that on the internet tomorrow.
That there
Hopefully
need
there'll
to be more Glottis tattoos. I agree with that. The sort of whale sounds in the music are overblowing on the contrabass clarinet.
Oh yeah.
Ralph Carney doing his little. That's the same thing with the birds that jump up at you and surprise you and squawk.
So this is like a play on moth navigation. Like they say that moths fly into lights because they're used to using the moon for navigation, and they're not used to electric lights. And so he's used to using the moon for navigation, but he's been distracted by this thing called the Pearl, and it's made him go march in circles all these years.
You know, Tim's really into Black Velvet.
Yeah.
And when I showed up my first day of work, there was a Black Velvet kind of canvas. I don't know what it was. It was like this kind of like you'd win it at the fair kind of thing. And it was like the Grim Reaper on a motorcycle with Mount Fuji in the background with these eagles flying out of it. Yeah. And it was just pinned to the wall above my desk on the project. And for the entire project, we really didn't talk much about it. It was just kind of there. And then when I moved on to the next project after it, I left my desk exactly the way I had found it, with the thing pinned up to the wall and the whole thing. And then Tim came and gave it to me. I still have it in my office right now. But he was like, that's the mural that binds together Full Throttle and Grim Fandango, because it's the Grim Reaper on a motorcycle.
I wanted to point out that this octopus that we're seeing underwater was, I think, one of the things that Eric Ingerson took on.
I was going to say that, yeah.
And it is that back in 1997, that's probably like an animator's nightmare right there, I think. Trying to animate all those tentacles and not having a really intricate rig to work and keep all the curves in the arms. I'm not quite sure if Eric animated the tentacles frame by frame and bone by bone. I think he may have actually spent more time working on a rig to get what he wanted than he did animating.
Yeah, he definitely set that character up, and he worked on that animal, and then I think he did the spiders too, weren't we saying?
I think Chris Schultz did.
Oh, Chris Schultz did the spiders.
But he may have rigged it, maybe.
But Eric, he was really good at rigging and setting up the really complicated characters so that they would animate well.
I think I remember Chris Schultz having some kind of elation going on when he got the spider rig, because he thought it was cool the way it worked.
And this is the part of the game I feel like is a lot more inspired by actually City of Lost Children.
Children, yeah, right.
That came out around that time, had a big influence on us. I think that's why we have a marching underwater diver too. Like there's a lot of scenes in City of Lost Children where there's a diver just marching on the floor of the ocean. It just seems so dramatic, and just he's made this slow and steady slow and steady progress, but he was so heavy and thick.
No flying fleas, though.
No flying fleas.
Tim had the coolest office.
He did.
It was filled with like tiki lights, and it felt like it was like Christmas land. Not Christmassy, but it gave you that same feeling of decoration and hominess.
Yeah. I was going to say warmth, yeah. Hominess. There was a couch in there, which was always nice.
Yep. And I think I probably overstayed my welcome in there a few times.
Yeah.
I think we all probably did.
You never knew when you should leave, because it was so much fun in there, but then it's like, oh man, he has work to do.
Yeah, it's no wonder he had to work through the night. It's because we'd
bother him all the time.
His office was like going to Disneyland, and you just sit in there and talk on the couch and just want to be a part of this this creation.
He had some old game consoles in there, and I would go and talk classic games with him because he knew that I was an enthusiast as well. So that was fun.
I think he should have made his office more boring.
He did spend a lot of time in that office.
How's his office now?
I've seen pictures. I think it's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. It's like a grown-up version of that office, maybe. He's still got all his Rubik's Cubes on his desk.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I forgot he was a master of the Rubik's Cube.
He is.
Really?
Yes. Don't challenge him.
Well, I would never.
Are the 3 stripes on the back of Manny's head, is that hair?
No, it's just a lazy design element to match the front of his head.
Oh, and the tops of his hands, remember? There's little stripes on there.
Day of the Dead. decorations, right?
Yeah.
I never knew what it was. I just thought it was cool.
It's an Adidas homage.
Yeah, so people, a lot of people may know this already, but for those that don't, the game is just a big pre-rendered picture. There's no 3D geometry in the game that describes the walls and the doors and the tables and all the props that are in the game. That's just a picture, a painting that's drawn in the background. So somebody had to go in manually and kind of make what we call walk boxes, but they're in 3D space. They're like a little model that just describes in 3D space where Manny's allowed to walk. And if you turn the background off, they just look like they're floating in space. There's nothing there. And there's boxes for walking. There's boxes for shadows. There's boxes for triggers that trigger like footstep sounds and things like that. But yeah, the image you see on the screen when you're playing the game, there is no real geometry there. So getting the illusion that Manny can walk in between tables and bounce off of walls and things like that is all smoke and mirrors.
See, I like that you still are not quite sure about Meche.
That happens a lot in those noir movies.
Totally. It's just like
the woman is like, wait, is
Casablanca.
she in leagues with a bad guy, or is she being controlled and being blackmailed by the bad guy?
Yes. A testament to the fact that they're written by men.
Nervous laughter.
Ow! Oh, my stockings. They're ruined. And this was my best pair. You try to have one nice thing on this cruel island.
I love the pulling the stocking down of the leg bone being
That was
sexy.
our
That's
one
awesome.
cover image.
Yeah.
It was in a magazine, PC Games magazine.
Oh yeah,
That
I
image.
remember that. Yeah.
But what is that from? This is definitely a reference to Popeye.
And also, Go Ahead and Scratch, right?
Let's go ahead and scratch.
And when Humphrey Bogart in Maltese Falcon, Big Sleep, Humphrey Bogart is meeting. Lauren Bacall comes into his office and she sits on his desk and she crosses her legs and she's scratching her knee, and the camera is showing you this from a interesting angle, right? And then she sees that he's looking at her scratching her knee, and she covers her knee with her dress. He says, "Go ahead and scratch," right?
Scratch. I was thinking more of Popeye. Olive Oil falls into cement, and she steps out of cement, and everyone's whistling at her because she has shapely legs. And the cement falls away, and she has olive oil legs.
Oh, I forgot that.
That's what I always think of when I think of the scene.
There it is.
You can't hear what he's listening. What is Domino listening to on his headphones in your mind?
Oh, it's not just what is there. We
can actually
actually
hear
have
like
him
a little-
listening. He's listening to his own theme, and it's done as a headphone. We didn't mixed it so it would sound like headphones. It's very quiet, but he's listening to his own music. I was going to say about the music where he reveals the whole big conspiracy theory. That was a jam between the cello player and the contrabass clarinet player.
Oh yeah.
Basically, the idea was that since it's a whole complicated conspiracy, that they would just jam and jam forever on the same theme, kind of weaving it out.
I always thought because they're so cute. I just had to be mean to them. Like once when my sister got her tonsils taken out, and she had big puffy cheeks. I remember my aunt came to visit, and she goes, "Oh, you look so cute. I just want to be mean to you." And I never really understood it until we had these little baby angels in the game. I just want to just terrorize them so you can get out your scythe and scare them and do all these horrible things.
It's the
little
Mr. Bill and it's the Mr. Hands in all of us.
Angelitos is actually the little children in the cage. Comes from a term that it was a popular kind of well, it was traditional in Mexico to take pictures of your children even if they were died, very young.
Yes,
Like
yes.
photography of
It's
little
a-
dead
it's a
children
whole
in a coffin.
genre. Yeah, it's
I don't know if that
really-
happened in the States, but it was definitely in Mexico. that
Mexico,
done.
yeah, I've seen those. I think you showed them to me actually.
And the word they use for children when they're young when they died is angelitos.
Oh yeah.
It's a dark game.
It is dark.
Reciprocating chisel. This scene is kind of actually right out of the Fountainhead. This really, I think is it Gary Cooper or someone like that. And he's doing this super manly like drilling into this wall, and the love interest of it comes over and like is watching him getting all aroused in a kind of a 1930s kind of way, and she's so
Right.
mad that she's out riding her horse and she slaps her riding car up onto her leg to show her frustration. It's this hilarious scene. But for some reason, I really like this jackhammer that he's just going into this wall with. And so it's here, and it's very similar erotic content here between Manny and Chipito.
Yeah, it's like I can see the brotherly love.
One of the things with Manny's head and the look at stuff was that really meant that you couldn't put a lot of inventory items very close to each other, or it limited the number of things in a room, because even though you could toggle through and he would look at things kind of in sequence, it could get tricky on if you put like 3 things on a table. Is he looking at thing number 1, thing number 2, or thing number 3? So that was an interesting thing, because Lucas was known for these adventure games with very dense, lots of things to click on in the screen, and you really couldn't do that here. But the game doesn't really feel lacking for it.
I feel like that's filled in with dialogue. I mean, ultimately, you'd have those Hunt the Pixel games. You'd have a million things, and you'd have to have one line for each thing. And with this one, it's more like there are fewer things, but there's more to say about each one, more context, or Manny kind of thinking to himself about things. It's a little more ruminating. So I think it adds to the character just in terms of how much you kind of understand Manny or empathize with him.
And do you remember the Jesus bug? The
No.
one where when Manny would come on the water and he would float around all over a screen.
Yeah.
And so it would just randomly show up. And that was this bug that could not be squashed. We would think we'd kill it and it'd come back.
Oh.
And talking about just trying to get it done, right? We were around the clock. It was towards the end. And literally some of us were sleeping there, and Brett Mogilevsky was working around the clock. And finally, it was Tim, Steve Dodderman, myself, and then Brett's like, I gotta go home now. I'm gonna go home, and they're gonna test the new build, And I was like, okay, go home, get some sleep. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and then he just got home, and the Jesus bug came back.
Oh.
Yeah, and then. So we were sitting in Steve Dodderman's office, and then I was on the couch, and we were like, well, who's gonna call Brett? And Steve looks at me and he's like, you're the production manager. And I was like, oh, God.
Hey, Brett, how's it going?
I know. Hey, hi. Can you come back? Thanks.
One thing that was a little weird on animating all this underwater stuff, when you animated a little section like Manny jumping off the conveyor belt or climbing up a chain or getting dragged along by a boat or whatever, you would always try to add that element of the physics of being underwater.
Yeah.
And then seeing the harsh contrast of when you're back in interactive mode and we're still using the same animation of him walking above water. It was hard for an animator to get over that. These little things you can't let go of.
You would have had to do a whole new set of anims.
Yes. And the other thing is, like, that may not have been the thing that would have stopped something like that. It could have even been like, there would be too much code required to switch a system or something. Like, who knows what the reason was. I remember being see how their hands kind of clip through their sleeves? I remember being really annoyed by that as an animator, having to settle to do it, because you couldn't get the poses or the lines you needed without making things kind of collide. It's something we just had to kind of live with.
And something we still live with today.
So that chain that's holding the ship, at one point we had to add joints to that, because I think at one point it's animated and it kept crashing and we couldn't figure out why, and we eventually figured out that you couldn't have more than 99 joints in a rig in Softimage at that point, and it had like 100 joints or something.
No, but again, it's this funny thing when people, maybe see this stuff and they think of movies now that maybe look better, but, we were having to deal with a lot of limitations.
I'm actually really, really excited to see the remastered version because, you look at elements of this game that was made over 15 years ago, and visually it still kind of holds up to games that you can see today. So, curious about what it's going to look like after the Double Fine gets finished with it. I think it'd be pretty special.
So one of the things that was another technical problem that was really interesting was the save load, because I wanted to cut a bunch of corners on save load to just make it a little easier to implement. And we had talked about things like you could only save and load, or when you load, it would load at the beginning of a room and back up content a little bit, or just do it where it was a little bit more convenient. And Tim really wanted a really high fidelity save load. And I remember trying to talk him out of it, and he threw the gauntlet down, and he was like, if Manny's in the middle of a line and there's a puff of smoke hanging in the air, and I hit save, when he restores, he should pick up from the middle of that line where he was at, and that puff of smoke should be in the air. And I was like, all right, man, if that's what you want, that's what you're going to get. And it was a big pain. It took a lot of work to get it there. But that's the way the game shipped, and that's kind of, with controls and things like that. Tim was pretty uncompromising and had a vision of what he wanted this thing to be. And as much as we were able, we gave him what he wanted.
So this whole environment, I think, was worked on around the end of the game, and we had to bring a few other artists on.
Oh yeah.
At the end in order to get it all done.
Yeah. No, and then I kind of remember that towards the end, because it was just like a skeleton crew, because I think just the budget had gotten so big that I just remember Pete and a few other people working on it for a couple months or something.
Yeah.
While all of us had to move on to other projects.
Now all that water is running in the Rebel Salt engine. The game is running in the Jedi Knight engine, and the
oh, that's right.
all the stream videos from the Rebel Assault engine.
That is right.
So we're compositing Rebel Assault technology on top of Jedi Knight technology, and then all the Lua scripting for the gameplay. Is that what comprised the Grime engine, which we never actually called the Grime engine at the time, but Brett wanted to call it the Grime engine. It was like
that's
Grim.
funny.
And in later, he's been able to do enough interviews where he's called it the Grime engine that people just call it the Grime engine. Now that's fine. It should have a name.
Everything should.
Those look like my sister's curling irons.
I was just going to say, those things always scared me. They are truly terrifying.
The
those
curling iron?
grinder. No,
the grinders.
The grinders. The curling irons, just a lesser degree.
Those are based on my sister's curling iron. No, you don't call them curling irons. Curlers. Based on my sister's curlers.
Right.
And my terrible fear of curlers.
They're fearsome things.
I can't even imagine what was going through his head at this point, because just the size of this game, being able to absorb it all before it's realized.
And he always had a really good idea of where we were and what was going on.
Yep.
And we were talking earlier about how there really wasn't a schedule that I remember, an art schedule for this game. It almost seemed like we just all sort of chose tasks, and then we had Leslie sort of following up to make sure we were doing them in about as much time as they should take, or not getting bogged down or stuck.
God, this is where people nowadays would be like, Tim, the ideas you have here about this conveyor belt where you can switch directions and rip a chain with a scoop, it's really complicated, and we could eliminate a lot of work if we just cut this one puzzle. But this is like, no, we went all the way and we fully implemented exactly what I hoped would happen. The conveyor belt would reverse direction, chain would go up and down, Manny would climb down and against the force of water, bunch up the chain. This is all so complicated. Oh, and you create a little loop. I was like, this all makes sense in my mind, so the player will be able to figure this out. Like the way that you looped it over that boat. I don't even know if that would work. That's like when you whip a hose to like get it uncaught when you're watering the plants in the backyard, and your hose gets caught.
Right, yeah. Do a little whiplash effect, yeah.
There was a the elevator in my dorm that you could push open while it was moving. You push the gate open and freeze it in between floors and hang out in the elevator for no reason. But there was a little strip of metal up in the corner that the door would plug into when it was closed to know that it was closed. And we tried to get the elevator moving with the door open, we're sticking our fingers in this thing trying to trigger the little switch. I totally got electrocuted because it was like a live actual electrical current in there instead of
ouch.
So that's where that comes from. that little door closing thing, yeah.
From ill-advised college activities?
Drunken college dorm elevator near-death pranks.
It's funny, the casting of Manny was it was tough because obviously you have I wanted to hire somebody who was legitimately Hispanic and not somebody putting on a fake accent.
Right. Oh, for sure.
And normally in a sort of the casting process, you'd sit down with the project leader and you'd probably have 5 to 10 candidates that you'd be looking at, and with Manny we had 2, and Tony was more Humphrey Bogart, and the other actor was more comedic, and I was terrified that Tim was going to go the comedic route because I thought Tony was the guy, and I remember printing out resumes for the 2 guys, and Tony had a lot more experience. And then there was a really cool picture of Tony taken from Havana where he's sitting up at the bar, and he just looked cool.
Yeah.
And I made sure that went in too, and so just to help kind of push it in the direction I wanted it to go.
That's great.
It's the perfect voice.
Yeah, he's great.
The animation team was very green, and we're lucky to work under people like Pete and some other senior folks on the team, like Eric Ingerson and Mark Hamer. We came out of school learning traditionally 2D animation and probably had about a month or 2 of work on Monkey Island 3, I think, which was still semi-traditional. And then this was our first kind of interaction with 3D and computers, and we struggled and watched Eric do the most complex things you can imagine.
It was all very new. And I think we had a couple of consulting sessions. This was back when we were still kind of connected to ILM, and so we had Kyle Balda, was a LucasArts alum and at the time worked at ILM. He came over and gave us some 3D pointers at a couple of points. We had some special private sessions.
So once in a while, if there was a solo part that we could get to be recorded by a real person, we would do that. But I don't know if you remember, we were kind of under a lot of schedule pressure with that.
I do remember some.
And people were like
one late night or 2. There was a late night or 2.
And then there was like, you're spending $13,000 on live musicians? Are you crazy? So we were lucky we could do what we could do at all, but.
And look, where are those guys today? I don't even remember their names. And here we are. Here we are talking about Grimm.
Exactly.
Those guys are all dead. I'm sorry. I mean, I hope they're dead. I hope they're happy spending time with their families and no longer working on games. Which I think actually is true.
It's hard to make them kiss because they have those.
They don't have lips.
Yeah.
They should have added like a knocking sound.
Oh, that would have been funny.
Awesome.
Bones kissing.
Yeah. Making out. Imagine what that sounds like with a bony face. Alex, you had mentioned on our break that you were the master of playing through this game the most quickly.
That's right.
I think you should talk about that, because when I played this game, I think it took me a couple of days.
Yeah. I'm interested in playing the remastered version to see how long it takes me. I think it'll be, 12 hours or more, but when we were in test, obviously we're playing it, every single day, so we know it inside and out. But when a brand new build came down, we always had to play through from beginning to end. And I was the person that always ended up doing that because I could do it the fastest. And I got down to just a little over an hour playthrough time. I want to say like an hour and 10 minutes was my fastest time. Yeah, it was something else. I mean, I knew the whole game, like instinctually, and now I barely remember any of it.
You must have been able to skip through cutscenes or something.
Oh yeah, you can.
Yeah,
and you can skip dialogue too.
I think the cutscene tape that we received, so we could watch them. I want to say it was almost 2 hours long.
Oh, it was cool. It was like an hour and 45 minutes or something.
That's really
good
cool.
Lord.
I'd like to watch that. I mean, I guess we're watching it right now.
The guy who played these Peruvian flutes, I believe, is from Peru. To look at the credits again. He lives in the mission. It's like the whole Grimm score lives in the mission.
One of the core things about adventure games we think about a lot was what is keeping the player going forward, and what is the reward? Because, you know, an RPG game, you kill somebody, you get loot, you get items and stuff like that, and or you get rank. You know, so what is the reward for playing an adventure game and its environments?
Yes,
really, it's
discovering the new
like
place.
It's unlocking the new environment.
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes a cutscene and stuff, but really, it's environments and finding a new place. And it's also spiritual in the way that it feels. That's how you feel like you feel like this is the end of the game, because when you get to the part in the story where like people are in the clouds or in the heavens, and you start to hear the pan flute music, you know you're kind of near the end of the story somehow.
Right.
But then you go back and there's a whole another year, which creates a feeling of the game being super long. Like I'm playing Mario right now, and there's more and more levels. After the end of the story, there's more and more, which makes it feels really long. But if you like it ends at level 5 and then there's 2 more levels, but if you like had 7 levels, people wouldn't appreciate it. But if you ended at 5 and then you have there's more levels, it feels really long.
It's like the encore effect.
Now that's the ashtray that is the very first shot of the game and the very last shot of the game are the same, just like in Sugarland Express. So the shot of the little figurines around that ashtray is the same as the band that stands around this fountain later.
Right.
That's how you prove that you took at least one film school class in college. You make the first shot the same as the last shot. Basic stuff. I remember what you said once about playing, I think it was the Day of the Dead theme, and you got the band to play it, and then you asked them, like, hey, guys, would you, is there something you might play, like in your own band? And they said, maybe on Halloween.
That's right.
Which it doesn't sound like a Halloween piece of music to me, but I guess they were just saying it was freaky.
Yeah.
Or unusual. I love those cars. You don't even get to see them in the game much, but there's some neat concept art of them. They have pipes coming out the side of them, which is weird. It's like Glottis fixed them up. But I think they're based on some actual like snowcat combined with a panel truck. That's because like we'd have this list of things that are going to be in the game, and nothing was just like made a truck, make a truck. It was like, no, let's get Peter Chan design what a cool snowcat truck would look like in the 30s, but also kind of Mayan in a weird way. And
yeah, it is kind of Mayan. That's funny.
Like everything would get designed.
It's funny because Pete was always great at knowing. Not only would he know it was going to slip, he would always say, no, and then he'd spew out a date, and he was always within weeks. You know, he always, and sometimes that date was way past where we were being told the date was. In fact, it always was. But he was always right, and I don't know if it was just a sixth sense or if it was.
Well, I
remember
remember specifically what you're talking about. I'm not going to be completely correct, but early in the year, I predicted that it would be June.
Yeah.
Which was about 2 months past our deadline, and I felt very bold doing that.
Totally.
But I felt pretty on solid ground doing that. Of course, this was internal, just within the sound group.
Yeah, we never would
share
that
this
to you.
with other people. And Pete immediately fired back, Day of the Dead. We all said, what? Day of the Dead. What is that, November 4th?
Yeah, like 4th or 5th?
Yeah.
November 5th.
And so, you know what? He was within, we'd have to look at Wikipedia. Do you remember the release date? I don't remember.
Oh, it was October 20...
Close enough.
He was within a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
He was within a couple of weeks, and that was about March that he did that.
Oh,
and
wow.
it's quite amazing that he was able to see that distance. I don't know how he did it, but he said it with conviction too. That's the funniest thing of all, and he ended up being right. You know, Leslie, I remember how you worked to keep everyone together and to help the team snuff out bugs and get this thing finished up. And I have to confess something after all these years that that as we would observe bugs in the game, that translated merely to us as, okay, fellas, we have more time. Let's get back to work.
Yeah.
Let's make this stuff even better. And so we'd see someone's head float off their body and just exit the screen while their body continued to remain on screen. We'd say, that's at least another month.
So that's how you got more time.
We knew what the schedule was by just simply playing the game.
You can hear your brother's charango in this too. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it was a second ago. I think I heard it. It's somewhere in the Mayan train station music.
There was somebody that will remain nameless, but But I remember they said, because they'd come out of advertising, and they said, well, there's 3 types of animation. There are dogs and cats who chase each other. There are dogs and cats that talk to each other. And then there are logos that spin around. Those are the 3 types of animation. So we need to put
that
chains.
made one potentially amazing animator quit.
Yes.
That
And
ended
come
up
to
being
Pixar.
a soup at Pixar. So
Yes.
you can do your own homework to find out who that was.
Yeah, this is Alan Bloomenfeld, who really brought a lot of heart to Glottis.
Yeah, totally.
He's just a real sweetheart.
Oh, yeah.
Someone told me like this was the moment they cried in the game, just hearing how scared Glottis was in the scene, because he gets really frightened. And it's actually a reference to a claim that a babysitter made about me when they were babysitting me. They'd said, oh, you were so scared when your parents, you would sit there and you'd say, mother, I'm frightened. And I was like, no, okay, first of all, I never said that. I never said mother.
Yeah, that's suspicious right there.
But it got to be this family joke. Mother, I'm frightened, mother. And so that line actually got in the game.
I have to say, coming out of school, I felt super lucky to, first of all, be hired by LucasArts by some colleagues of mine who went to the same school, and to walk into this building and see all the concept art for this game on the walls. I was like a kid in a candy store. It was instant euphoric inspiration, and I just felt like the luckiest guy in the world coming out of school, getting to work on a project of this caliber. It was beautiful.
Well, I think it's one of the real challenges for adventure games, because so many things you make for an adventure game are single use, like single use animation, single use scenes, single use textures. They're all like you do a first person shooter, you do adventure game, like a platform or something like that. There's so many animations that get reused so many times throughout the whole game. And an adventure game, a huge amount of it is just custom throwaway, meant to be seen once or twice, and occasionally all the time, like walk cycles, but. It's not like Mario, at the time they were doing Mario 64, and it's like Mario has, a ridiculous number of animations, but it's a finite set, and it's like they can all be loaded at all times. In this game, you have to dynamically load all the animations as they're needed, and you have to make sure they're available before they're triggered so you don't get these glitches, and while you wait for them. And a lot of them they're thrown away. They have to get, every single one has to be individually processed by a human to get them into the game and potentially rigged up. And that's one of the challenges of making adventure games, is that you have all these sort of custom things and you want to reuse them as much as possible. But in order to do that, you have to automate a lot of stuff, automate as much processing as you can. But you still have to have that ability to fix things. In film, we'll fix it in post. It's the same kind of thing. It's like we'll fix it in the engine, or we'll fix it in the tool, as opposed to we'll fix it in the source art.
And that's the like you can walk to any room you want, and like all the little one-off assets. I think that's a unique challenge technically to adventure games that a lot of other games, other genres don't really have to address. But we're constantly like loading in custom stuff and kicking custom stuff out. And on this game, memory is tight. You walk into this room and we need 16-bit flipbooks of doors opening and closing and one-off animations of you may go and play the piano, you may not go and play the piano. And there's all this technical kind of tomfoolery going on of trying to get the content that may be that somebody
might be used,
might not be used. You might just be running through this room to some other room,
place, yeah.
And it's not like loading up a level in a first-person shooter where you're like, okay, I know what's going to be in front of the user at any one point in time, and we're going to use the same bad guy 50 times over. So I just need to get the stuff to run the bad guy in memory. This was this constant dance of like just-in-time loading and management of stuff, because you could walk into this room and spend 10 minutes in this room and explore every bit of content that this room could offer you, or you could just be running through on your way to somewhere else.
Back to this other puzzle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tim, how come you know so much about neurosis and psychosis? It's really.
I don't know if this is
quite
all.
striking.
I don't know if any of this is legitimate psychological knowledge or just what I learned from movies.
Well, speaking as sort of a crazy guy myself, it rings true to me.
Actually, I think it was funny when you came in and you were all excited about working on this game. Like, I really like adventure games. I want to do this kind of thing. I want drama in games. And I think about Telltale, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's pretty much in keeping. It was a long time ago. But I remember when you came in, it was like your game that you had worked on was like a helicopter game. Where you
Helicops.
Helicops. And it was like as far different from this as you could possibly imagine a game would be. And I would not have imagined that a person who worked on Helicops was actually interested in adventure games.
There weren't any games like this. All I wanted to do was play with little people and computers, and I had gotten to the point where I almost ended up working on a baseball game because that was the closest thing I could find to little people and computers. And that's when I saw this. I was just like, it doesn't matter. I have to work on this.
Oh, Lola.
Yeah, the sprouting was came later. It was like a solution to a problem we were having narratively with the game, which is like, how do you make anything matter in the Land of the Dead?
Right.
Like if you're going up against mobsters in a movie, usually you're afraid they're going to kill you or someone you love, right? Or break your thumbs. And Land of the Dead, who cares? You're dead, right? So we're like, how do you kill people in the Land of the Dead? And so we wanted to have it be that you were essentially brought back to life. Like it went the other direction. You were returned to flowers. And then flowers become the symbol of death in a weird way in the Land of the Dead. But flowers are such a huge part of the Day of the Dead. Like the marigolds that you use in the Day of the Dead celebration, and the smell of marigolds are like a big part of the ceremony. So it was nice to have them be part of the game too. And then at the end of the game, we wanted to have this thing called the meadow, which was just full of flowers, which hopefully by that time would just look like death to you.
I think I offended Tim once when I said, Tim, you should write scripts for movies. This is such a great idea. And Tim said, I make video games. I want to make video games. Why are you telling me to do something different? And I felt bad.
You cried that time?
No, I only cry at night, late at night. But Tim
was often at the office at nighttime. I remember him.
Oh yes,
locking his office door and me trying to peek in between the curtains he laid over top of the glass, and he would be in there for days.
Wow.
His writing. Yeah.
Yes.
When he finally got down to doing the dialogue stuff, I remember that it was always like a pressure valve that blew on him at one time or another, and he would just lock himself in and churn out this amazing dialogue.
No, I mean, I think Tim was a very intimidating person. To try and be funny around Tim was hard because he was so funny, and I never felt like I kind of rose to.
I relied on my funny Canadianness,
right,
and my looks. That was enough.
I think it was, yes, your biting wit.
I think I bested him one time with a facial expression that was not intentional.
What was the expression? Can you do it for the people on the commentary?
You'll see it in the game if you look hard enough.
Good Lord. Amazing.
But it was great. I mean, Grimm is definitely still sort of the most satisfying project I think I've ever worked on. It was just a lot of fun, and you know, the Cuban actors, American actors, Irish actors, a guy from Hungary, you know, just all over the place, just to bring that sort of diversity to it.
I remember some trickle-down drama from upstairs in the test pit towards the end where things didn't seem to be getting done as fast as whomever wanted them to be getting done, you know. And I just remember, like, there was some question as to whether or not we'd have to cut a bunch of scenes or even a whole year from the game, you know, or something, because stuff wasn't coming in.
That was terrifying.
Yeah.
I don't know if people agree with me. That was my idea of, what do they call something that makes you barf? Something you take, you drink that makes you... No, not expectorant.
No, it's like...
Epicac.
Epicac. That's the
like
syrup.
A verbal Epicac. Yeah. Manny talks about the stuff they pack canned hams in, because it's always grossed me out, that weird gelatin. Everyone would have a different thing that they'd bring up that would make them barf.
Right.
What's yours?
Yeah. Ipecac.
Oh, look at that.
It sounds like what you do when you eat it.
Ipecac.
Yeah.
I don't know how players are supposed to figure out this puzzle, that you have to fill the floor with regurgitated gelatin. It's not the first thing that jumps into people's minds. Where the hell did you get that?
I forgot there was I forgot there was a regurgitated gelatin puzzle in the game. That's a standard thing, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the standard things that happens in noir is a guy meets a woman that just spirals him into a world of shadows and intrigue and stuff like that. Like, and sometimes it's because it's a femme fatale who's up to no good, and sometimes it's also a totally innocent woman who just happens to be on this path that she's in sort of trouble, and he gets pulled into it. So you meet Meche in this world, and it spins Manny off into this whole different path. But it's really, for some reason, it was important to me that Manny was actually partially to blame, or feel like he was partially to blame.
Right.
Like he thought he had caused her to be lost.
Right.
When it was actually Domino's fault that she got sent off. He stole her number 9 ticket.
Well, you didn't want to blame the woman, like
Well, no.
say Double Indemnity does, or
yeah, where she was actually scheming and where this is more just someone who Manny feels like he has caused misfortune to come to.
Right, or Maltese Falcon does, for that matter. Yeah.
I remember one day Tony came into the studio and he had a silk shirt on, and on top of the silk shirt he had a sort of a little sweater, sleeveless sweater. And we were recording, and it was like, God, what are we hearing? What are we hearing? And the engineer's like, oh, I think it's a sweater. And we're like, hey, Tony, can you take your sweater off? Takes the sweater off. Back to rolling again. Sound's still there. So he took his sweater off and went back to rolling, and turned out it was a shirt that was making the noise. And we were like, Tony, it's the shirt. It's a silk shirt. And so he's like, it's okay. I got a t-shirt on underneath. So he was down,
just stripping down.
He was stripping down into his t-shirt, and did the rest of the session in his t-shirt. But that was the thing with Tony, is he just loved, he loved working. And for part of the production, he was shooting at night on a movie. And there were a couple of days where he came in and he only had like a couple hours of, a few hours of sleep. And I remember saying, like, we can reschedule the session. And he's like, no, let's do it. And he always was
Nailed
there
it.
to give it his all.
We haven't done it in too many games, but having a year transition between things and changing the location and letting you pick up friends and travel, like, just allows you to have so much character development, where Manny and Glottis have now been through a lot of stuff together, and they're in different clothes, which just, they're in different jobs, and they've moved from town to town together, and just starts to build this real friendship between them, which is nice. And I think I realized I'm going to put 4-year transitions in all games from now on, just so we can have that kind of relationship building.
Yeah, I remember having to get extensions. That was like my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
No, I would have to go in because I'd be the same thing. Because I always advocate for the artist, and I did. I mean, that's why I loved working with Tim. He's so creative. And so we would talk and collaborate, and then when I'm like, no, look, this is the date, because I'm trying to say the date, and then he did the ship story. And so then we had to go get more time. And I was like, well, how are we going to do that? And then he was like, here's my technique. I go into Jack's office and I stay in there and I threaten to light myself on fire, and I just scream and I stay in there until he extends the date. And I'm like, that's a great strategy.
Yeah, it worked.
I know. It worked. Threaten to light myself on fire.
Well,
That's
see,
one
we
of
would
my
never
favorites.
try that in the sound department, because Jack would just say, go ahead.
Yeah.
I imagine these pigeons being all over the game, everywhere. And they just showed up in a couple places, and it made me sad.
I think I wrote up a crappy bug about that. And I said, we want more pigeons.
Thank you, man. Thank
Closed.
I think we ran into the polygon limit, and we could only have so many. The pigeons
We're alpha flats. There were many alpha
Yeah,
flats.
but there were a lot of them, and they were actually some of the highest poly things in the games.
It's my fault.
Because I think every bone got built on the pigeons.
They were actually really fun to animate.
Yeah, the pigeons were a real fiasco.
It's kind of
Sorry,
hard.
Alex.
It was my first experience.
I appreciate this. Finally brings some closure to the pigeon situation.
I think
I'm answering your bug right now.
Right now.
I'm gonna
Let's
go
close
back
this
and
bug
check
out.
this off.
That was also my first experience animating something and not knowing how it was going to be used. So that was kind of like a different mental shift for me. And it was just the first time I had to make a bunch of idles and loops, or takeoffs and lands that all had to work together. It was pretty interesting. I remember swearing.
Oh my God!
Look at that.
I forgot about this set.
That looks like a painting or something. That's crazy.
Yeah, this is one of the. Yeah, when you get a Peter Chan drawing, this one was a Widowmaker as well, where you just thought, how does that pipe go into that?
Things didn't quite line up.
I was going to say that environment with the pipes in it, it almost had like a Day of the Tentacle or Sam and Max feel to it. There's a lot of distortion in the pipes, and felt a little more wacky than what we see in the rest of the environments.
No, definitely.
I didn't put in too many late nights, but there was one where I was in the office at 2 a.m. just making notes on the script, and all of a sudden Chuck Jordan walks by my office and says, "Hi," and there was a way about him that 10 minutes later I got up from my desk and went over to his office and went in and said, "Did you just get in?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I get in at 2. At 2 a.m. He's like, "Yeah." And I guess that he'd put in so many late nights that his whole time clock had shifted. And so he said to Tim, he's like, "Hey, is it okay if I just come in at 2 a.m? And Tim was like, "Sure."
I really like puzzles where you use things backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Like you use the instead of using a metal detector to find something metal, you use something metal to find a metal detector in the kitty litter, and then here you're instead of shooting Sproutella into a bones, you're using bone flakes to expose a Sproutella chain. I love this room. It looks almost exactly like the concept art. It looks like so painted.
Or to open a door, you lock it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's just the formula for all the puzzles. You do something backwards. I think something that helped make this game, one of the secrets to it, is just watching a lot of old movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of this, it's like some of them are references, but a lot of them are like plot elements, ideas of relationships between people. Is the subtle stuff that came out of watching old black and white movies, because they just did stuff so differently then. And I mean, I know there were formula movies back then, but they're not the current formulas, and they're not as pat as the movies you'd watch today. They're surprising. Like old film noir movies have relationships between people that feel really different than modern relationships. Some of them are messed up and based on old social things, and some of them are just like cooler. It's weird.
Well, there's a certain stoicism that you don't,
and a certain
kind of reserve maybe you don't see in characters,
and a little bit of an honesty in characters. Like nowadays, like you don't think the way people talk now. There's different layers of meaning to everything and different subtexts.
Say everything's cool, which means which means F you, which means that no, it's more like things.
So even though they're old, they're very refreshing, is what I'm saying. Like Casablanca has a lot of just honest people talking honestly to each other in a way that's different than a modern movie.
But hearing all these names too, I just feel like a lot of times I catch myself saying I went there instead of I worked there, because it was really like it was an extension of college, and it was just everyone, we were all friendly, we all hung out together. So whether we were hanging out at work or at someone's house, I mean, it was just all a blur,
That's funny. I went to LucasArts.
Yeah, Lucas High.
I remember the big wall of concept art that was like and 15 feet tall, and you'll see on the internet, probably see some of it on the special edition of these pencil drawings that are, and you only get to see them one at a time, but there were hundreds of them, and they were all pinned up to this giant corkboard.
Yeah, it's like wallpaper.
Like wallpaper. Yeah, it was amazing to see this beautiful art transform from these pencil drawings on the wall into the game in front of you, and
it kept the style in a lot of cases. I mean, some of the things were the 3D
faithfulness.
Scenes were amazing.
Yeah, the faithfulness to those original Peter Chan drawings is incredible.
One of the cool things about this game too is that there's a few characters that actually went through costume changes throughout the game, which was a nice detail.
No, and it really gives you a sense of time passing.
This is a really boring fact, I'm going to share it anyway. There's no inventory combination in Grim Fandango. You can't use an object with another object in your inventory.
Oh, that's right.
So if you want to put the bone in the bone grinder, you have to put them in this receptacle in the room. Another weird mechanical contrivance from my own head. A handheld snow grinder that would plug into a giant snow grinder. I'm sure they have those, right?
Wait, what's a snow grinder?
It's like a fake, like to make fake snow for the show. And this is what I'm talking about. You can't use the hand with the snow grinder. Oh. So you put the snow grinder down and then put the hand in it and then pick it up. And that's how you combine. This is the one object combination puzzle we have.
Ah.
I don't know why the lid on it closes. That was like really important technically.
You know, this was a real boundary pushing from an adventure game
Yeah.
genre point of view. And I was making the joke earlier that it's like, and if everyone isn't claiming that you're ruining adventure games, you're not making an adventure game because
the grand heritage has to
Yes.
be insulted by every new thing you do in adventure
Yes.
games has to be an insult to all adventure games before it.
Yeah.
How dare you innovate?
But like the controls on this
How
one were
dare you.
it's so controversial that the controls were terrible and we're killing adventure games.
How dare you take away my mouse cursor?
Yeah. But the new special edition has point and click.
I just
so
found that out today.
You can play it as was imagined, the boundary pushing experiment,
Yeah,
or
they've-
you can
They've erased all our innovation.
or you can play it the
Thank God.
right way.
Thank God our innovation
Yes.
has been undone.
Yes, we don't need that crap anymore.
There was a certain amount of improvisation at the more towards the end of the game you got, the more the musicians improvise. And so sort of
Yeah,
like
this sounds like
everything's
the Meadow kind of, isn't it?
It is. It's a little bit like in fact, I think it's a remix of some of the tracks I used in the Meadow. And they're sort of riffing on the Hector theme.
Wait, how are they? Where's the Hector theme in this?
The da-da-da is part of...
Dun, 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 dun. Oh my God. You're ripping this whole game wide open with this Hector conspiracy.
That's what I do is hum the Hector theme to them before they would start jamming.
I really didn't like early 3D,
Yeah.
like 90s 3D, because
Right.
I always thought it looked like cardboard boxes that were taped together and that someone had dragged nylons over, you know? and that implies a lot more smooth skinning than actually existed. It was really like, it was really, and then everything was painted on the outside, even things that should be modeled as an interior space, like ribs on a skeleton or something. Everything was painted on the outside.
Right.
And it looked ridiculous.
So it looked like everybody was wearing a Halloween costume anyway.
Yeah, and then I saw those papier-mâché skeletons where they painted the ribs on the outside, and I was like, this is perfect. This kind of folk art would actually look really good in 3D. There was a lot of pressure to get into 3D back then because it was seen as the future. I mean, obviously it was because a lot of everything turned into 3D, but 2D is still a big money-making thing in games too.
Yeah, we used the sarangi, the Indian cello,
awesome.
to sort of make a reference to the hippies, I guess you'd say.
To who was the guy with the Beatles?
George Harrison was
the
oh,
guru,
you mean
the guru they hung
the
out with.
guru, the Maharishi. Yeah, and also Ravi Shankar was sort of a friend of theirs, musical friend of theirs.
So yeah, one of the things that I think people don't realize is it's not just pre-rendered art, but there's pre-rendered Z buffers.
That's right.
Through the whole thing, and
Yeah.
we thought that the pre-rendered Z buffers were just do all the work for us, and it turned out that if you look through the game data, the pre-rendered Z buffers, there's a lot of hand-painted pre-rendered Z buffers. We made a Z buffer editing tool, which
Right.
was funky because it's 16-bit data, and you can't edit 16-bit data in an 8-bit monitor. So
Yeah.
you'll
It's
see.
it was grayscale. It looks like a ghost scene. It's like you look into like a foggy version of the world.
Yeah, so we did like a quantized 8-bit version of it, and you could paint into it, and people would just use like big boxes and find places there where he was clipping, or we didn't want him to clip. A lot of it was he was slightly behind something and he shouldn't have been. So you would like go into the edge of the sofa or something, and you just black it
Just
out.
black it out, yeah, and
so that
push
he
it,
would
push it.
pop in front of it.
Yep.
There's a character who shows up later on called the Florist, who is played by a great actor called Keith Sarabica, who I've worked with a lot over the years. And Keith, oftentimes when he auditions, the characters the way he does his auditions, they're not usually safe choices that he makes. And the first time I came across him was he was auditioning for Boston Low, and he just, Boston Low's a space commander, and Keith was doing something very deep and dark and strange, and because his last name is Zarabica, it just sort of stuck in my head, and I used to always look forward to whatever audition Keith was going to throw our way, and they were always bizarre and never appropriate. And then when he auditioned for the Florist, who's insane because he, in the real world is a forest and deals with flowers, which are beautiful things, but in the Grim Fandango world, it's death. He's gone crazy, and he's deranged, and Keith just nailed the part and was just brilliant. And it was at that moment that I realized, oh, he's actually a normal dude, and he can do all sorts of other things, but it's just his audition choices are different and unusual.
I relied on Tony Plana to improvise a lot of Spanish, because I didn't write any of the Spanish dialogue. I'd write Buddy. It was always like, Buddy, hey, Buddy, what's going on?
And he would
bud?
say F.A.
And he'd
or
go,
something like that.
yeah, let's say Carnal, which is like, Carnal was like really close. Like
Carnal, like
of
blood brothers.
Yeah,
sort
blood
of?
brothers.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I think he calls him hermano, like brother, a few places. And also the Icole. And then there's a really bad word for goat, which he's like, oh, in Cuba, he's a Cuban actor, and he's like, it's not that bad in Cuba. In Mexico, that's a swear word. But I mean, here's, so there's some Spanish in here that might be not for children.
Need a rating?
Yeah, I need a rating only in Spanish. I think he's doing Army. I think that's his deal. He's doing
Right. Yeah, no, I get
Boy.
it. Yeah, it's like Gomer Pyle. Yeah.
Kind of like Gomer. Not Gomer. No, he's doing I don't know what he's doing.
Well, I mean, not Gomer specifically himself, but that sort of world of humor. Like T. Boone Pickens. No, not T. Boone Pickens, but T-Bone Pickens.
That's some of the most
Slim
visually...
Pickens. There we go. Now,
oh, exactly.
Like Slim Pickens in Doctor Strangelove.
Clint, I want to bounce off like what you were saying before about the passion that everybody had, because it is. I remember us all just, it was no big deal to stay the night sometimes, especially towards the end, because we were all just trying to fix whatever bugs there were and just make it better and polished. And I remember some of the conversations that you and I would have about just organization and making sure that, you know, the creative process was supported and all of that. And it just was nice that we all cared about our areas so much, you know.
Absolutely, Leslie. I think that was really what I was trying to say earlier, is that the goals that everyone set were so high, and then they became internalized as the bare minimum.
Right.
So even though they were beyond necessarily the call of duty, if you will, they were still viewed as must-achieves.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's like a given on a Tim game, though, right?
Yeah.
Because his creative, bar is so extremely high. And you see him working so much that you just can't, you can't help it. And especially when you see the game and the story that you're working on, and you want to make sure it's the best.
That's right.
And you can, every little nuance, I mean, just the music, and like you said, the attention to detail, just those birds, the flapping, you know, it's just amazing.
This game was so long and complex, and had new characters in like the last act and stuff.
Right.
And I was like, how do we make so much complexity in 3 years? I know it sounds like a long time to people who don't. A lot of it was that it was double through. It was like 6 years, because we also worked all night for 3 years.
That's true.
We worked all day and all night for 3 years.
True.
It's like a 6-year project. And for the good of the games industry, we try not to do that anymore. And people thought when the game was going late, like it took longer than it was. It was supposed to take like a year, not like 3 years.
Yes.
And people wanted to do it episodically. They're like, let's just release it episodically. But who knows what would happen if we had done that, because it might not have made Act 2 or Act 3.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way things are changing at the company. I do remember during Full Throttle you saying, what we've never made here is just a real like swing era, like crime, film noir story. And it always kind of stuck with me, because I was like, yeah, we never have done one of those.
Well,
we should do one, because I don't know what started this. A lot of us at the company were starting to get into film noir. I don't know if it was because there was a film festival at the Lark Theater where they showed every single great noir film, and we went to that, or if it was just we were at that age where you started reading Raymond Chandler. We talked about Raymond Chandler a lot in the office, too.
Yeah.
You were like, she was so cold, a lump of spumoni wouldn't melt on her shoulder.
Slice of spumoni wouldn't have melted on her shoulder.
Always stuck with me, and I was like, man, I got to read more Raymond Chandler. And so that started me on that.
He's awesome. And during, it was either Day of the Tentacle or Full Throttle, I wrote a little gangster theme just because I thought it would be cool. It just popped into my head, and I wanted to put the melody down. And that might have prompted that comment about it'd be cool if we did a noir thing someday.
I'm glad I put that in there. I didn't know that happened. Manny actually got to do some salesmanship. Manny actually got to be a travel agent at one point in the game. I've totally forgotten that. Genius. Whoever made this is a genius. That's what this commentary is all about. Just me watching things and being like, oh, dang. Good job.
Yeah, nice going.
All we had to do was extract the text lines and just do it what they'd always done for all the Scum games. But I had a brother who's a screenwriter in Hollywood, and he had all these special tools to format his scripts as a screenplay. And I was like, it would be really cool if I gave Dara something he could bring into those guys who are really familiar with screenplays. He could bring them something that looked like a screenplay. So when I wrote the dialogue extraction, I made it actually format it like a script and actually do the characters going back and forth. And I gave Tim a way that he could indicate in comments in the code. If he format the comments a certain way, she pouts or huffily or some other kind of cue, I would extract that and put it along with it. So just like in a normal screenplay, you'd have here's my line, and it's haughty or whatever. You'd have some cue to the actor about how it's supposed to be read. And I even put in scene markers, like this is in the High Roller Casino, or this is exterior docks. So they had a context for where it was in the game. And through the magic of HTML, when the web was new, I was able to just spit out HTML. So that's what I did. I wrote something that made a screenplay looking thing in HTML, and then they were able to print out and take it down there.
Oh, I think I thought of the scary thing that ends in a greenhouse. It's Frosty the Snowman. Remember? Frosty the Snowman, they travel with the snowman, and then she needs to stay warm, so he brings her in. She's going to freeze to death, so he brings her into a greenhouse, but then the bad magician locks him inside the greenhouse.
So it's
and
like
so
a
he
version
melts,
of Frozen.
And I almost cry every time.
Oh.
And then Santa comes and reminds you that it's magic Christmas snow that he's made out of. Okay.
Oh my goodness, I missed out on that.
So this is obviously a reference to Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah. That's a famous noir for sure.
Mm-hmm. Modern noir.
Yeah.
Its themes are subtle.
Well, and I think it's neat too that we've just, with Tim's storytelling, we come to see flowers as a bad thing, and to see an actual meadow full of flowers, it makes something that would be pretty ominous.
It's grotesque. Yeah, it's
a mass grave. That's crazy. That's a lot of flowers. That's a lot of polygons right there.
So yeah, those are individual flowers in the foreground, and then in the background that they were, pardon me, textures.
And Paul didn't copy and paste any of them. He built each one.
I grew them digitally. I put water on
He built them really small, and then I had to animate and scale each one of them up to the proper size.
I programmed a whole thing here that accurately figured out which window you're aiming at in the greenhouse, based on your angle of rotation and stuff. It's totally not even for a puzzle. I don't know how I figured out which level of, I guess how close you are to the greenhouse. We remember the stuff we worked on the most, and just figuring out which window to smash when you shoot was my little touch here. All for nothing, because you don't even shoot them in there. I love how the audio here tells the story of the chemicals moving up the pipes.
Doesn't sound good.
So he kind of kills him from a distance. It's like the end of Big Sleep.
I forgot that.
Shoots him from behind a car.
Are we gonna have commentary over the credits? This is where you they do it on movies.
Oh,
this is where we see names. Oh yeah, that guy was cool.
Yeah.
That guy was cool. Oh, I forgot about her. She's cool. And then Tim Schafer is a jerk. One of those guys is a jerk. I'm not gonna say who. Adam Schnitzer. I forgot to mention Adam Schnitzer. He did that room where you fill the coffins up with the materials. He was awesome. Sarah Simon did textures along with JPeth. Jillian Moffat. Sandra Nelson. That's right. Sandra Nelson was one of the official Darth Vader appearance persons.
And Jeff did the
He
mixing.
was so tall that he could actually wear the costume.
Hans Christian was the cello player.
There's a guy named Hans Christian?
Hans Christian Roimschussel, actually, is his full name, but he just goes by Hans
Strongo
Christian.
provided by Martin Schaefer.
Yeah.
Senior Worcester, Chris Brown, still hanging around, causing trouble. Watching these credits, you get that weird feeling. Like, usually you don't do stuff in sequence. You don't work from the beginning of the game to the end. you work on all parts all around
Right.
usually. But this is the one thing where like these end credits were the things we were doing. Like wiring this up happened the night before we shipped or something. Like we were,
Yes.
and so we were like, "Can you approve the credits?" And we're just watching. We're like super tired. We're like, "I ship this game." Like, yeah, they look good. Yeah. Good. Race cat names by the Grim Fandango team. Oh, there's some race cat names that happened with the. I sent out a message like, "Hey."
That's right.
You
The
guys help me
sequence of the
think of.
Luftwaffe theme. I forgot Mike's theme was in there.
Wait, where is the
sequence? I think it's in the. I think it might be in the blimp music.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I forgot all about that.
Me? I don't remember that even happening. You know, I didn't play a lot of Swaddle. I played Battle Britain, but not a lot of Swaddle. And the box. But yeah, so when you watch these, I totally remember that weird last night feeling of production, which is always really weird, especially with the disc-based stuff. Before the idea, now we think we'll fix it, we'll patch it, you know. I mean, we totally care about the quality of the games, of course, but if something really, really bad happened, we'd patch it. But in the disc-based games, we weren't as into patching. It could happen, but you really were like, oh God, I'm so nervous to ship this thing. I'm so like saying it's done, saying you're not gonna fix it anymore, but it's done was so much more final. So these last few days when you've just done everything you can for the game and you're just trying to wire the credits together in the last few minutes. So I'm feeling that stressful feeling right now.
So you know that it's the first 90% of the game is no big deal. It's the second 90% that's the tough.
Nice.
That's the tough
That's
part.
a nice one.
That's kind of
Denise
stolen.
Scholar still works at Double Fine. There you go.
Steve Dodderman?
I'm not going to mention any of those names. What? No, Steve Dodderman. He works
in.
went to Australia, but now
works
he's
in
somewhere
Australia.
else.
Oh
he's still down
yeah,
there?
no, I just talked to him.
Alan Dundes. Alan Dundes was my anthropology teacher in Berkeley, where I learned about the Day of the Dead and started this whole crazy thing. Spin Ray is you.
Yeah, that's my band. What was that? What were you doing in there? Probably just special things.
These are special things, and the team got to pick.
because they were kind of like my family.
was
So
yours,
when I
so-
wasn't at rehearsal, I think I was like, thanks for putting up with me not being there.
And I'm sure it meant a lot to them when they played this game. That's what I always say about the cats. One of my pet peeves. I hate cat and pet thank yous and credits.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, even if the cat figured out how to use Steam, or
Right.
even if the cat figured out how to download this game,
No, good point.
how would they even finish the adventure? How would they get past the signpost puzzle? Like that? There's no way a cat could get that far.
Right.
They're not going to see this. Thank you.
It's true, and probably they were just hanging out and enjoying themselves anyway.
Yeah. They have no way they'd have the patience for an adventure game. So with that thought, there we go. That's wrapping up the final. Thanks everybody for playing. Thanks for buying the remaster or pirating it, however you got it. And thanks Peter McConnell for still working on games with me.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's been a long time.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot about Grim Fandango in this session. Like how many times you got that one piece of music to work out for you. That was amazing. And it was really fun watching it again. And now I know how to solve all the puzzles for when I do my let's play of it. And I'll actually act like I know what I'm doing. I don't want to leave now because I like the way my voice sounds.
Yeah, it's
on
like
this
basking in the
microphone.
glow, isn't it?
Mhm. I wish everyone could hear me this clearly and loudly all the time. All right. Thank you for playing. I'll say that now because we never used to put that in the credits, and we do every time
Yes,
now.
and
So
thanks-
we'll just say it now.
Thanks for listening too.
Oh, no one's going to listen to this.
That's right.